Welcome to History to Relax, a place where the past is told slowly, gently, and with enough detail to help you unwind while you learn. Tonight, we step behind one of the most powerful and mysterious barriers of the 20th century, the Iron Curtain. For decades, it divided Europe into two worlds, one open and free, the other shadowed by fear, scarcity, and quiet defiance. Together, we'll journey through daily life on the hidden side. The childhood classrooms filled with propaganda, the warm secret kitchens where truth was whispered, the underground art and music that kept hope alive, and the breathtaking moment when the walls finally fell. If you enjoy long, thoughtful storytelling that helps you relax, I'd love for you to support the channel. Please tap the like button. It helps others find these stories. Subscribe if you'd like more nights of slow history and quiet journeys through the past. And leave a comment telling me where in the world you're listening from. It's always inspiring to know where these stories are reaching. Now, take a deep breath. Settle into a comfortable place. Let the noise of the day drift away. Sit back, relax, and join me as we begin our journey into life under the Iron Curtain. Part 1. A Wall of Shadows. The war had ended, but the quiet that followed was not the peace many had hoped for. Across the smoking ruins of Europe, cities still bore scars. Streets were lined with buildings reduced to skeletons, roofs ripped away by bombs, railway lines twisted like broken ribs. In this fragile moment, while people tried to rebuild homes and find missing loved ones, a different kind of barrier began to rise. It was not made only of concrete or barbed wire. It was built first of fear, suspicion, and politics. Winston Churchill would soon call it the Iron Curtain, a phrase that captured something heavy and final, something that divided a continent not just in territory, but in spirit. The guns had fallen silent, but the air was still tense. You can almost feel it as you step into a ruined European city, perhaps Berlin, Warsaw, Prague, or Budapest. The smell of damp brick and coal smoke mixes with the scent of fresh plaster as families patch up what the war destroyed. Children play with scavenged toys near burned-out tanks. Old men sweep broken glass from stairways. Life is returning, but uncertainty hovers like a cold mist. For people in Eastern and Central Europe, the Red Army's victory over Nazi Germany was both liberation and the beginning of a new, more subtle occupation. Soviet soldiers remained first as protectors, then as permanent fixtures. The governments that formed were not fully free to decide their own paths. Moscow's influence seeped into every cabinet meeting, every new constitution, every plan for rebuilding. A sense of invisible hands rearranging the future grew stronger each year. Imagine standing in a breadline in Warsaw in 1946. You clutch ration cards, your stomach hollow after years of war. Around you, conversations are hushed. No one speaks too loudly about politics. A man behind you mutters about prices. Another glances nervously over his shoulder before saying anything at all. Everyone knows that there are ears everywhere now. Some official, some just neighbors eager to prove their loyalty to the new order. The curtain was not one sudden wall. It was rolled out gradually. Elections managed to ensure communist parties won. Newspapers bought or banned. Opposition leaders quietly arrested or made to disappear. Soviet advisors arrived in ministries to assist. Factories were taken under state control. Land was redistributed or collectivized. It all looked, on the surface, like rebuilding after catastrophe. But for many, it felt like slipping into a new kind of prison while still wearing the dust of the old one. At first, some citizens welcomed the changes. After years of Nazi terror, the idea of equality sounded comforting. The Red Army had driven out Hitler. Surely this meant freedom? Propaganda posters promised a bright workers' future, smiling laborers, harvests of gold grain, mighty dams harnessing rivers. Schools introduced lessons about socialist brotherhood and the triumph over fascism. People were tired, poor, and desperate for stability. If the price of food was controlled and a job guaranteed, perhaps this was worth the compromises. But quickly, cracks appeared. The price of loyalty was high. Speak against the party line and you risked your position, your friends, even your safety. New secret police forces emerged in each country, trained by the Soviet NKVD. Their names would become whispered with dread: the Stasi in East Germany, the A with acute VH in Hungary, the Securitate in Romania, the UB in Poland. Files grew thicker, filled with neighbors' reports, intercepted letters, overheard jokes. An unguarded sentence at work or in a cafe might bring a nighttime knock on the door. Even children felt the change. Schools encouraged them to join youth groups, the Pioneers, the Young Communist League. They sang songs about Lenin and Stalin, wore red scarves, and learned to salute the party flag. Some believed with bright, unquestioning eyes. Others felt an unease they could not name. At home, parents often warned, "Do not repeat what we say here outside." The kitchen table became a safe space, but also a cage of caution. Daily life during these early Iron Curtain years was gray but not hopeless. Streets bustled with rebuilding projects. Cranes swung steel beams over squares where statues of past kings were replaced by statues of workers. Markets reopened, though goods were limited and often rationed. Women patched clothes and traded recipes to stretch scarce ingredients. Men returned to factories and offices reorganized under state control. Farmers faced new rules, sometimes forced to join collective farms where private land was dissolved into the people's property. The air smelled of coal and wet cement. Long queues formed outside bakeries or butcher shops when rumors spread that butter or meat had arrived. Western products disappeared almost overnight. Shops displayed practical shoes, rough wool coats, sturdy tools, nothing flashy, nothing wasteful. Propaganda posters painted with bold reds and yellows urged everyone to work harder, produce more steel, harvest more wheat. The plan will lead us to prosperity, the slogans declared. Travel shrank. Borders that had once felt porous became sharp and guarded. Soldiers manned checkpoints. Paperwork multiplied. Someone who had visited relatives in Vienna before the war now found it nearly impossible. Escape was still technically possible in these first years, but increasingly dangerous. Each month brought new restrictions: exit visas, permits, surveillance. Yet life also contained ordinary joys. Weddings were still celebrated. Children still played in courtyards. Music, often state-approved folk songs or patriotic marches, drifted from radios. Some found meaning in collective projects, rebuilding schools or planting trees in parks destroyed by bombs. Others took quiet pride in surviving and making a home despite shortages and fear. Human resilience, though muted, persisted. One of the heaviest burdens was the feeling of being watched. The new regimes did not trust easily. People suspected their phones might be tapped or their letters opened. Radios could be confiscated if tuned to the BBC or Voice of America. Friends learned to speak in half sentences, testing loyalty before sharing true opinions. A neighbor's sudden promotion at work could mean he was informing. Jokes about the party or about Stalin were told in whispers, followed by nervous glances. Families sometimes split under this pressure. A father might work for the party while his son secretly listened to Western jazz. A wife might report on her husband to save herself. Not everyone was forced. Some believed strongly in the socialist dream and saw dissenters as traitors. But for many, trust frayed. a curtain hung even between loved ones. Despite this, private life could be warm and deeply valued. A small apartment, perhaps just one room with a coal stove, became a sanctuary. There, behind heavy curtains, people dared to play forbidden records, discuss forbidden books, or remember lost relatives. Parents tucked their children in with fairy tales untouched by ideology. Couples shared quiet laughter over contraband coffee. The more oppressive the public world became, the more precious these intimate spaces felt. To maintain control, the states behind the Iron Curtain filled every public space with their story of hope and strength. Newspapers printed only what the party approved. Cinema celebrated heroic workers and Soviet soldiers. Statues of Lenin, Stalin, or local communist leaders rose in city squares. May Day parades featured thousands of citizens marching in perfect lines, holding red flags and portraits of leaders. For a child watching from the curb, it could look exciting. Banners waving, music blaring, candy tossed into crowds. For adults, it was more complicated, a mix of ritual, pressure, and silent calculation. Participation meant safety. Refusing meant trouble. Many learned the art of double life, one face for the state, another for home. Propaganda also promised modernization. Massive plans for electrification, steel plants, dams, and new housing blocks were announced. The future, posters said, would be bright and equal. And sometimes real improvements came. Illiteracy rates dropped. New apartments replaced ruined housing. Some families finally had running water or electricity for the first time. These successes gave the system credibility, at least for a time. Yet the price, silence, conformity, fear was always present. Behind the curtain, the other side became a mixture of rumor and imagination. Western radio stations, if caught late at night, spoke of elections, jazz, consumer goods. A pair of blue jeans or a pack of American cigarettes became prized treasures, smuggled and traded. Glossy magazines, if someone could get them, were passed from hand to hand, pages worn thin by hungry eyes. This hunger was not only for goods, but for freedom, the ability to travel, to speak, to listen to whatever music one wished. The contrast grew sharper as memories of war faded, and the younger generation, who had not lived through the Nazi years, questioned why they must remain cut off. For now, though, the curtain held. Barriers hardened. By the early 1950s, leaving without permission became nearly impossible. As this first chapter of the Iron Curtain era closed, a strange normality settled. People married, worked, studied, raised children. They adjusted to shortages, learned which phrases were safe, and built small islands of private life. Yet unease lingered. Each knock at the door after dark still made hearts race. Each speech from Moscow reminded them that the system's power was absolute. In Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Poland, East Germany, Romania, and Bulgaria, millions were caught in this tension, grateful for peace after war, but wary of the cost. The dream of socialism promised dignity and equality, but reality often meant surveillance and suppression. Few yet dared to imagine uprisings or reforms. Survival, for now, meant adapting quietly. If you walked those gray post-war streets, the plaster still drying, the posters still fresh, you would feel both exhaustion and fragile hope. You would hear hammers repairing roofs, children laughing despite rubble, the distant clatter of a factory. But you would also feel the eyes of the state, invisible yet heavy. A continent was rebuilding, but also dividing, slowly, silently, with each new law and watchful file. This was life as the Iron Curtain first descended, not yet the fully locked world it would become, but already a place where freedom shrank, where whispers mattered, and where ordinary people learned to live carefully in the shadow of great powers. Part 2: Gray Streets and Quiet Radios. Morning arrives quietly in a city that is still learning how to live again. The streets are wet with last night's rain, glistening beneath pale sunlight that filters through low clouds. Apartment blocks built from hastily laid bricks stand shoulder to shoulder, their walls unpainted, their balconies crowded with drying laundry. Smoke rises from chimneys and coal stoves, drifting into the gray sky. Somewhere a tram squeals around a curve, its wheels echoing between the buildings. This is everyday life now, a mixture of resilience and caution, ordinary and heavy at the same time. You wake in a cramped apartment, perhaps a single room divided by a curtain for privacy. The bed is narrow, the blankets patched. The air smells faintly of coal dust and boiled cabbage. Outside the window, you hear the shuffle of feet on pavement as people head to work. A neighbor's radio murmurs softly, a state station playing marches before the morning news. The voice of the announcer is measured and official, each sentence carefully chosen. There will be no surprises in the bulletin, only achievements, production goals, and speeches by party leaders. The silence after the broadcast feels just as meaningful as the words themselves. Breakfast is simple. Black bread. Sometimes a little butter if you were early in line yesterday, perhaps a thin slice of sausage saved from the weekend. Sugar is scarce, coffee expensive, so many drink a roasted grain substitute. Children eat quickly and slip on coats for school, where lessons mix arithmetic and history with slogans about workers' unity and loyalty to the socialist state. They will recite poems about factory heroes and brave partisans. They will also whisper jokes in corners, gentle jokes, never too daring, but enough to remind themselves they are alive. On the way to work, the city feels subdued but busy. Trams grown past, their paint chipped. Workers in overalls carry lunch pails. Clerks hurry to government offices. Posters line the walls, strong men holding hammers, smiling women in red scarves, leaders staring confidently into the future. Factories hum, though often without enough parts or power to run efficiently. People joke quietly about making do, an entire culture built around repairing, reusing, and improvising. If a machine breaks, someone will find a way to keep it running with wire and scrap. If a coat tears, it will be patched and patched again. Shops open, but lines have already formed outside. Queues are a normal part of life. You may stand for an hour to buy butter or shoes, never sure if the stock will last until your turn. Sometimes word spreads that a shipment of bananas or oranges has arrived, and entire neighborhoods seem to appear from nowhere, hurrying to claim a taste of something rare. In winter, you wait for coal deliveries. In summer, you wait for meat. Patience is a survival skill, and so is knowing someone, a cousin, a friend, a shop assistant, who can quietly set something aside for you. At work, the atmosphere depends on where you are. In an office, desks are arranged neatly, and portraits of party leaders hang above. Conversations about production targets and plans mix with careful silences about politics. In a factory, machines clatter and workers shout over the noise, their breath visible in cold months when heating is poor. Sometimes there is pride. Building locomotives, tractors, or radios for the nation feels meaningful. Sometimes there is frustration. Shortages of materials, inefficiency, and bureaucracy slow everything down. Suggesting better methods can be risky if it seems to challenge authority. When lunchtime comes, people gather in canteens or around makeshift tables. The food is filling but plain. Soups of potatoes or cabbage, bread, stewed meats when available. Jokes are whispered, not shouted. There is laughter, but it is guarded. No one knows who might be listening, and a careless remark can reach the wrong ears. The secret police recruit informants in every workplace. Some are pressured by threats, others tempted by small privileges. Everyone learns to speak safely, to complain only about shortages or weather, never about the party itself. After work, the trams fill again. People return home with groceries or whatever goods they manage to find. Apartments are small, but kept tidy. A single bulb lights the kitchen where dinner simmers, cabbage rolls, dumplings, a thin stew. Children do homework, practicing state-approved history lessons that praise the liberation brought by the Red Army and the wisdom of party leaders. Parents quietly correct the narrative when they feel safe enough. They tell older family stories, but always with the warning not to repeat them outside. Evenings bring a rhythm that is both ordinary and careful. Some families tune radios to foreign stations when static and signal allow, lowering the volume and closing windows so neighbors cannot hear. Voice of America, BBC, or Radio Free Europe carry forbidden news and music, jazz, rock, and roll, reports of elections and protests elsewhere. Listening feels dangerous and thrilling. A knock at the door could mean confiscation of the radio, or worse. But many risk it anyway, hungry for something beyond official voices. Others spend evenings with neighbors or relatives. Tea is poured, cards are played, quiet gossip fills the air. Weddings and birthdays are still celebrated, though modestly. Homemade wine or vodka appears, and people sing old folk songs that slip past censors because they predate ideology. In these small gatherings, warmth survives. Humor becomes a shield. People tell satirical jokes, never too sharp, about the absurdities of bureaucracy, about the endless lines, about grand plans that never arrive. Laughter here is an act of endurance. On weekends, city parks fill with walkers and children. Couples stroll hand in hand, old men play chess on benches, mothers push prams. Some families visit the countryside if they have relatives with a bit of land. Gardens become lifelines, growing potatoes, cabbages, or apples to supplement ration supplies. Farmers adapt to collective systems when forced, but small private plots quietly keep many families fed. The smell of fresh soil and homegrown produce offers a small taste of independence. Yet even during these quiet moments, a low hum of caution remains. The state is everywhere, in posters, in schools, in the voice of the newsreader. Each May Day brings parades where attendance is expected. Workers march carrying flags and slogans, smiling for photographs that will appear in newspapers. Not joining could mean losing a job or an apartment. Most go along, waving politely, clapping when told, returning home relieved that the day passed without incident. Children feel this duality most sharply. They learn songs about glorious leaders and are rewarded for loyalty in school. They also sense the whispered warnings at home. Some are proud members of the Young Pioneers, earning badges for good deeds. Others secretly question why books and music from the West are forbidden, why travel is restricted, why their parents lower their voices when politics arise. For many, childhood is a careful balancing act, curiosity and obedience intertwined. The culture that forms under these conditions is one of resourcefulness and quiet resistance. People find ways to express individuality, hand-sewn dresses with a hint of style, carefully painted apartment walls, private libraries of forbidden books shared among friends. Some artists push boundaries subtly, embedding double meanings in poems or paintings. Musicians smuggle records or record secret tapes of Western hits to share underground. Every small act of taste and choice becomes an act of claiming humanity. At the same time, propaganda tries to fill imaginations with visions of progress. Newspapers report new apartment blocks, new power plants, record harvests. Films celebrate brave factory workers and soldiers. Leaders visit construction sites to give speeches about the future, and sometimes the promises feel real. Illiteracy drops. Many families move from huts or ruins into modern apartments with electricity and running water for the first time. Healthcare, though basic, becomes more widely available. For those who lived through war and poverty, these improvements are tangible. But the trade is always there, unspoken yet felt. In exchange for stability and slow modernization, citizens surrender freedom to speak, to travel, to question. Some accept this quietly, grateful that bombs are no longer falling and that children have schools. Others bristle but hide it. A few dare to resist and pay dearly. Prisons hold political dissidents. Some vanish into labor camps. Stories circulate in whispers about arrests for a joke, a letter, a meeting. Over time, this dual life, public obedience, private thought, becomes second nature. People learn when to nod, when to keep silent, when to let an official phrase pass without comment. They build invisible walls inside themselves to survive. The curtain is no longer just a border between East and West. It is also a psychological barrier within each person, separating what can be said from what must stay hidden. Yet hope does not die. It lives quietly in small acts of kindness, in shared music, in the secret exchange of ideas. It glimmers in the eyes of students who dream of travel, and parents who whisper real history to their children, and neighbors who help each other through shortages. The system tries to control every thought, but it cannot fully erase curiosity or the longing to be free. As night falls on the city, the trams stop running, and the streets grow still. Curtains are drawn. Radios are tuned low or switched off entirely. A few lights burn in windows where someone is mending clothes, writing a letter, or simply sitting in silence. Life continues, not dramatic, but deeply human. Survival here is quiet, steady, and careful. This is the heart of daily existence behind the Iron Curtain in its first stable years, a rhythm of work, waiting, and watchfulness. It is neither pure despair nor simple contentment. It is a life built from small victories over scarcity, small rebellions against fear, and constant calculation about what can be said aloud. It is gray streets filled with determined footsteps and quiet radios tuned, whenever possible, to a wider world beyond the walls. Part 3. The Secret Listener. Night has fallen again, and the city is quiet. Windows glow faintly against the darkness, their curtains drawn tight. Inside, families gather around tables or radios, speaking in voices that rarely rise above a murmur. Somewhere a tram rattles by, nearly empty now, its bell sounding lonely on the silent street. The day's work is done, but a deeper labor continues. The work of staying safe, of living carefully under the invisible gaze of the state. The secret police have no uniform rhythm that citizens can predict. They appear in plain clothes, sometimes at dawn, sometimes in the dead of night. Everyone knows someone who has been taken for questioning. Sometimes they return, pale and quiet, saying little about what happened. Sometimes they do not return at all. This uncertainty becomes a constant companion. The fear is not loud or theatrical. It lives like a steady hum in the background of every conversation. Each country has its own name for this force. In East Germany, it is the Stasi. In Poland, the UB. In Romania, the Securitate. In Hungary, the A with acute VH. In Czechoslovakia, the STB. People rarely say these names aloud unless they must. Children learn early that these organizations exist and that they listen. A casual complaint about shortages or leaders can be reported. A careless remark about wanting to visit the West might end up in a file. The safest path is to say little or to say only what is expected. Yet the great machinery of surveillance does not rely only on officers and interrogators. It depends on neighbors, co-workers, even family members. Informants are recruited quietly and constantly. Some agree out of fear. A veiled threat about losing a job or an apartment is enough. Others cooperate for favors, better food, travel permission, a chance at education. Some truly believe in the system and see informing as patriotic duty. The result is a society where trust becomes fragile, where the line between friend and watcher blurs. Imagine coming home after work and discovering your friend has been arrested. You remember the conversations you had about shortages, about radio broadcasts, about longing for freedom, and you wonder which sentence, spoken in comfort, reached the wrong ears. You wonder if your own name now appears in a file, if tomorrow a quiet knock will summon you too. This uncertainty is exhausting. It teaches people to live with layers, the public face that praises the party, the private heart that dreams of something more, and the hidden fear that neither layer is truly safe. The architecture of surveillance is thorough. Phones are tapped. Letters arrive already opened and resealed. Apartments can be searched without warning. In some cities, it is said that microphones hide in walls or ceilings. Even if the rumor is not true, it keeps voices low. Factories have political officers whose job is to monitor workers. Schools encourage children to report on parents who speak against the state. A careless father might discover his own child, coached by teachers, has repeated his kitchen table jokes to the wrong person. Despite this, life cannot stop. People still fall in love, still gather with friends, still dream. The human spirit adapts, finding small, safe spaces where honesty can survive. In kitchens with curtains drawn, families whisper true opinions. Trusted circles form, friends who share forbidden books, music, and laughter that carries a sharp edge of defiance. These circles are built slowly, carefully, with testing and patience. To be invited into one is to receive a quiet gift, a chance to speak freely, if only for an evening. Books play a special role in these secret spaces. Official bookshops carry works approved by the party, dense political theory, patriotic novels, carefully sanitized history. But under tables and in private libraries, other books circulate. A worn copy of George Orwell's Animal Farm or 1984 might pass hand to hand, its spine weakening from many secret readings. A Western novel or philosophy text smuggled in from abroad becomes a treasure. Even poetry can be dangerous if it hints too clearly at oppression or hope. Reading such words is risky, but it keeps imagination alive. Music travels along similar secret paths. While official stations play marches and approved folk songs, forbidden sounds, jazz, rock and roll, later even punk, slip through the airwaves late at night. Teenagers lean close to radios, tuning carefully to avoid static, savoring every beat that feels alive and unsanctioned. Homemade recordings on tape circulate quietly, copied again and again until the sound warps but the spirit remains. In some cities, secret clubs play Western records for small, trusted crowds. Each chord feels like a breath of another world. Art, too, adapts. Painters and filmmakers embed subtle double meanings into their work. A film about a factory might secretly criticize inefficiency. A play about medieval kings might echo modern tyranny. Audiences learn to read between the lines, to catch the unspoken. This quiet dance between artist and viewer becomes a language all its own, one of hope, frustration, and resistance without open rebellion. Religion survives as well, though carefully. Churches remain, some monitored more than others. Priests and pastors walk a delicate path, preach faith but avoid politics, comfort the suffering but never challenge the state too directly. Many believers attend quietly, praying in whispers, finding solace that the party cannot fully replace. In some countries, especially Poland, faith becomes a quiet backbone of resistance, not yet open, but alive. Despite this underground life, the official face of society marches on. Parades, speeches, and party congresses fill newspapers and radio broadcasts. Children bring home certificates for loyalty, and production heroes smile from posters. The contrast between this glowing image and the cautious private world is stark. Everyone knows it, yet everyone plays along, because open refusal is dangerous and often futile. The experience of surveillance seeps even into emotions. Love can be complicated when partners fear betrayal. Friendships grow slowly, tested by small risks before deeper trust is offered. Many live with a sense of double vision, the ability to enjoy a happy moment, a wedding, a birth, a good harvest, while keeping an inner part alert to danger. Joy exists, but it is quiet and often guarded. Sometimes the machine falters. Overworked censors miss a detail, a brave soul leaks forbidden ideas, a careless officer ignores a whisper. Hope can flare briefly. In coffee houses or apartments, small groups debate politics carefully, feeling for cracks. They know uprisings have been crushed before and will be again, but the dream of change never fully dies. It passes quietly from one generation to the next, waiting for a moment when it might matter. And yet, for many, daily survival is enough. They focus on family, on getting food, on repairing the apartment. They avoid risk and hope only that their children will have an easier life. The system relies on this quiet compliance as much as it does on fear. If enough people decide to endure rather than resist, the machine keeps turning. By the mid-1950s, the Iron Curtain has fully hardened. Borders are now heavily guarded, escape rare and perilous. Propaganda proclaims unity and strength, but cracks appear beneath the surface, whispers of rebellion, art that hides sharp truths, faith that persists in secret. The secret listener is everywhere, yet so is the secret dreamer. Ordinary people live between these two forces, balancing caution and hope. When you walk through the streets at night, you feel it. Lights glowing softly behind curtains, conversations hushed but alive. Radios whisper forbidden songs in darkened rooms. Someone copies a banned book by hand so another can read it. A neighbor smiles politely but hides private thoughts. The city breathes with quiet defiance, though it never shouts. This is life under the deepening watch of the Iron Curtain, a world where surveillance is constant, where trust must be earned slowly, where words are weighed before they are spoken. And yet it is also a world where love persists, art finds hidden pathways, and hope, though cautious, refuses to die. It is a life lived in shadows, but not without light. Part 4. Bread, Cues, and Quiet Ingenuity. Morning begins long before the sun rises. In the narrow hallway outside your apartment, footsteps echo as neighbors head for the bakery. The rumor spread late last night that a shipment of fresh bread and maybe even butter had arrived. It is wise to go early. You pull on your coat against the damp chill, clutch a small ration card or a few precious bills, and step out into streets washed with pale moonlight. Already, a line has formed at the shop. People stamp their feet to keep warm, breath clouding in the air, voices low and weary but threaded with small hope. No one knows how much bread there will be or whether the butter will last past the first dozen customers. This scene repeats itself across cities and towns under the Iron Curtain. Scarcity is not an occasional frustration, but a central rhythm of life. Supply and demand rarely meet. Central planners set quotas, but transport fails, crops rot, factories run short of parts. Even when production is high, distribution falters. It becomes normal to wait for meat, for shoes, for fuel, for a chance at something rare like coffee or fruit. Long queues are a part of the landscape, as familiar as the trams and posters. Children grow up measuring patience in hours spent standing beside parents, playing quietly while adults shuffle forward inch by inch. Inside the bakery, the smell of fresh loaves fills the air, warm and comforting. For a moment, there is pleasure in simply holding food that is not stale or gray. Yet everyone keeps an eye on the counter, worried the supply will run out. When you finally reach the front and receive your ration, perhaps a single loaf and a small piece of butter, relief mingles with a quiet, weary resignation. Tomorrow may bring nothing at all. Some people slip the baker a small favor, a bottle of homemade vodka, or a pack of Western cigarettes, hoping to secure better goods next time. Shops of all kinds function like this. Clothing stores have rows of the same rough coats, often ill-fitting, with few colors beyond brown or gray. Shoe stores may display only a handful of sizes. If a shipment of something desirable, say leather boots, arrives, news travels fast and a line forms before doors open. In some cities, a quiet barter system thrives. People trade whatever they can. A jar of homemade preserves for a pair of shoes, cigarettes for sewing services, a bag of apples for meat. Informal networks of exchange become a lifeline, knitting neighbors together in ways the state cannot control. Resourcefulness defines daily life. Nothing is wasted. Jars are cleaned and reused, fabric scraps become patches, broken radios are taken apart for parts. People know how to stretch food, how to mend furniture, how to coax another season from a worn coat. Some grow vegetables in backyards or even on balcony planters. In the countryside, small private gardens feed entire families. A few chickens, a pig, or a cow might be kept quietly despite collective rules. These modest sources of food mean survival in winters when state stores are nearly empty. Home kitchens are workshops of invention. Housewives and grandmothers master the art of turning little into something nourishing. Soups from bones and scraps, dumplings from flour and water, pickled vegetables to last the long cold months. Children help peel potatoes or cabbage, learning recipes passed down like family secrets. Holiday meals, when they come, are feats of planning and saving. Families hoard sugar, butter, or a rare cut of meat for weeks to create a single celebratory feast. The smell of baking on such days feels almost rebellious, proof that joy can exist even when the state controls everything else. Markets, where they exist, add color to the gray. Farmers and foragers bring what they can: mushrooms, berries, fresh eggs. Prices are high, but the goods are fresher and more varied than in state shops. Shopping here is both practical and social. Gossip passes quickly. News of protests, shortages, or a new rule travels faster than any newspaper. The market is where you learn that the butcher has pork this week, or that a neighbor's cousin returned from the West with real coffee to trade. It is also a place where eyes may watch, so conversations about politics stay guarded. Black markets thrive quietly in this world of scarcity. Someone always knows someone who can get Western cigarettes, jeans, chocolate, or records. Smuggled goods are expensive, but they carry an aura of freedom. A pair of Levi's or a tin of real coffee might cost weeks of wages, yet people save for them. Owning such items feels like touching another life, a small rebellion against uniformity. Officials condemn this trade, but often benefit from it themselves. Bribes and favors blur the lines between state and underground economy. Energy shortages add another layer of difficulty. Coal deliveries may be late. Apartments go cold in winter. Families huddle near stoves, wearing layers indoors, sometimes burning scrap wood or anything available to keep warm. Electricity fails without warning. Candles and kerosene lamps stay close at hand. In summer, blackouts turn evenings into quiet gatherings by lantern light. Children play shadow games on the walls, while adults sip tea and talk softly. These hardships breed resilience, but also quiet anger that few dare express openly. Transportation is another daily challenge. Trams and buses are crowded and often unreliable. Old vehicles rattle and groan, seats patched with tape. Long waits in the cold are normal. If you own a car, rare for most, spare parts are hard to find, fuel scarce. Bicycles and walking remain the most dependable options. Journeys require planning, tickets, connections, waiting. Spontaneity is a luxury the system does not support. Despite this gray economy, life finds small colors. Weddings still bloom with homemade decorations and music. Birthdays feature carefully saved sweets. Children play soccer in courtyards with patched balls, laughing as if scarcity did not exist. Women create beauty from little, crocheted doilies on tables, flowers grown in window boxes, clothes altered to look stylish. Men build shelves, repair radios, fix shoes for friends. Pride grows not from abundance, but from ingenuity, the art of making do. Propaganda tries to frame this struggle as noble. Posters and films celebrate the hard-working socialist citizen, smiling as they produce and share for the good of all. Newspapers report record harvests and factory successes, rarely admitting shortages. Official speeches praise self-reliance while blaming external enemies for economic difficulty. Most citizens see through this, but many go along silently. Open frustration is risky. Quiet eye rolls and shared jokes become the only safe protest. Sometimes, the shortages turn severe. Harsh winters or failed harvests bring genuine hunger. Families survive on bread and potatoes, stretching rations until spring. Parents secretly skip meals to feed children. In cities, soup kitchens appear, though quietly, to avoid admitting failure. These crises leave deep memories. Nights spent hungry, long walks to distant stores hoping for a delivery that never came. They shape a generation that learns never to waste and never to trust official promises too fully. Yet there are also moments of unexpected abundance. A sudden surplus of apples floods markets. A successful harvest fills shelves with cabbage and potatoes. A new trade deal brings citrus fruit for the first time in years. People celebrate these brief bright spots, cooking feasts, sharing with neighbors, laughing in long lines, because at least the line has something worth waiting for. Small joy shines brighter in a landscape of want. The rhythm of queuing and bartering creates a particular kind of community. Neighbors help each other, saving spots in line, sharing tips about where to find flour or fabric. A stranger might quietly pass along extra coupons for someone in need. Though trust is fragile when politics are involved, kindness survives in the shared struggle to feed families and keep homes warm. These small acts form invisible threads of solidarity, weaving a safety net the state cannot fully replace. Children grow up absorbing these lessons. They learn patience from hours in line, creativity from watching parents repair and repurpose, quiet caution from hearing whispers about politics. Some resent the lack of choice and dream of the West. Others adapt easily, finding joy in friends and small pleasures. Scarcity shapes identity, but it does not erase playfulness or hope. Behind the constant shortages lies a deeper truth. a planned economy struggles to match the shifting needs of millions. Factories meet quotas for the wrong goods. Transport breaks down. Leaders refuse to admit failure. The result is a daily life that requires resilience at every turn. People adapt, but the adapting is weary work. It seeps into their bones and conversations, shaping a quiet skepticism that will later feed change. Still, even under this weight, life moves forward. Couples marry, children are born, music plays softly from radios, gardens bloom each summer. The state can dictate production, but not love, not laughter, not the satisfaction of a well-cooked meal shared in a small kitchen. It cannot erase the ingenuity of hands that fix, build, and barter. These private triumphs keep despair from taking full hold. As another day ends, you carry your bread home through dimly lit streets. The loaf is warm against your chest, and the small piece of butter tucked in your pocket feels like treasure. Tomorrow will bring more lines, more shortages, more quiet calculation about what can be spared and what must be saved. But tonight, your family will eat together. There will be laughter, quiet but real, and the comfort of surviving one more day with dignity intact. In a world where so much is controlled, this small victory matters. This is the daily life of scarcity under the Iron Curtain, a world built on patience, barter, and silent creativity. It is a life where cues stretch like lifelines, where every object is mended and cherished, where neighbors quietly help each other endure. It is hardship softened by resilience, control resisted through simple acts of survival, and hope preserved in kitchens that glow faintly against the long gray night. Part 5. A Child's School Bag. Morning begins with the scrape of a chair and the soft clatter of a school bag being packed. In a small kitchen with peeling wallpaper, a mother checks the contents with care, a few pencils worn down from use, a notebook patched with tape, a lunch of bread and cheese wrapped in paper. The child, sleepy but obedient, shrugs on a coat and a red scarf, the proud sign of the young pioneers before stepping out into streets still damp from last night's rain. Coal smoke hangs low, and the sound of boots on cobblestones echoes between gray apartment blocks. School is a place of learning, but it is also the front line of the state's attempt to shape young hearts and minds. The walk to school is short past propaganda posters that tower over sidewalks, smiling workers, proud soldiers, happy children raising flags. Slogans shout from every wall about unity, production, and the great brotherhood of socialism. Some children barely notice them. The posters have become part of the scenery, like lampposts and tram wires. Others glance up with curiosity, wondering about the bright world promised there, a world of heroes and endless progress. Parents rarely explain too much. Caution travels from home to school in the way adults lower their voices when certain names or topics come up. The building itself is stark and practical. Long hallways smell faintly of chalk and damp coats. Classrooms are filled with wooden desks carved by generations of restless hands. A portrait of the leader, Stalin in the earlier years, later replaced by local figures or newer Soviet icons, hangs above the blackboard. Beside it might be the red flag of the party, its color vivid against the pale walls. Each morning begins with rituals, salutes to the flag, songs about loyalty and work. Sometimes the recitation of oaths promising dedication to the socialist cause. Teachers stand solemnly, watching for enthusiasm as much as accuracy. Lessons mix genuine education with ideology. Children learn to read and write, often with great success. Literacy rises quickly in these years. Mathematics, science, and practical skills are taught thoroughly because the state needs skilled workers and engineers. Yet history is carefully rewritten. Kings and old aristocracies are painted as cruel oppressors. Revolutions are shown as inevitable triumphs. The West is portrayed as greedy and exploitative, while the socialist world is noble and fair. Maps show the peaceful nations in warm colors and the aggressors in cold, threatening shades. Teachers repeat these lessons with the same steady rhythm day after day until they feel natural. Some teachers believe fully in what they teach. They see themselves as builders of a fairer future and speak with true conviction. Others are weary but careful. They know one careless comment can cost them their position or worse. Many walk a delicate line, fulfilling official duties while quietly encouraging students to think. A subtle raise of an eyebrow, a gently asked question, a recommended book slipped under the desk can signal more complex truths. But caution always comes first. The walls of the classroom, like the walls of the home, are assumed to have ears. At recess, the playground fills with life. Children play tag or football, their laughter echoing against concrete. Friendships form quickly in this shared world, yet trust remains fragile. Even here, the state reaches in. Youth groups like the Young Pioneers or Komsomol offer badges, songs, and uniforms that make children feel part of something grand. Meetings after school feature lessons in patriotism, community projects, and sometimes small privileges, better trips, better supplies. Membership is encouraged so strongly that refusing is almost impossible. Parents know that joining helps their children's future. Teachers know it shows loyalty. For some children, the scarf is a proud symbol. For others, it is a quiet burden worn for safety. Stories of the West trickle into these young years in whispers. A classmate's uncle has a forbidden radio and heard American jazz. Someone's cousin smuggled back chewing gum or a glossy magazine. These small glimpses ignite curiosity, though caution keeps most questions unasked. Official propaganda works hard to fill imaginations first. Comics and songs about brave workers, films showing Western decadence and poverty, lessons warning that life there is cruel and unjust. Still, curiosity persists, especially among the young who have not yet learned to fear their own wonder. Teachers monitor behavior closely. Children are rewarded for loyalty and punished for dissent. School newspapers may feature stories of model students who exposed anti-socialist remarks at home or in the street. The message is clear. Repeating the party line earns trust, and silence about what one hears can be dangerous. Some children, eager to please or fearful of punishment, report their parents' or neighbors' words. Families learn to guard their dinner table conversations more carefully than ever. A careless remark can ripple outward in ways no one intended. Yet even here, joy and normal childhood survive. Art classes produce bright paintings of houses and animals, not just factories. Music lessons teach folk songs older than the regime. Literature classes, though censored, still introduce great poems and classic novels, some full of quiet human truths that slip past ideology. Teachers who love their subjects find ways to spark imagination despite constraints. A science experiment with glowing chemicals, a poem read with genuine feeling, a story of a distant land told with wonder, all remind children that the world is bigger than the party's vision. Festivals bring color and excitement. May Day parades are both spectacle and obligation, but to a child they can feel magical. Drums, banners, flowers, and the thrill of marching with classmates. School plays and concerts offer moments of pride. Parents fill the hall to watch their children sing or act. Holiday celebrations, though stripped of religious meaning in many places, still bring sweets, songs, and warmth. Teachers decorate rooms with paper chains and stars. Children remember these moments more than the speeches that surround them. At home, Schoolwork spreads across tables under the yellow glow of a single bulb. Parents help where they can, though many quietly correct the official history. A father might explain what really happened in a war the textbooks distort. A mother might slip a banned book into a child's hands with the warning to keep it hidden. These small acts of counter-education build quiet resilience. They teach children to think critically while outwardly conforming, a skill essential for survival. Teenagers feel the weight of the system most sharply. They are old enough to see the contradictions, but still trapped in its rituals. Some throw themselves into the pioneer or comsomol organizations, seeking opportunity and safety. Others rebel quietly, listening to forbidden music, wearing hair or clothes that hint at Western styles, reading hidden books. Some dream of escape, but know the borders are nearly impossible to cross. Many cultivate a double life, loyal in class and meetings, honest only with a few trusted friends. University, for those who reach it, offers both more freedom and more control. Higher education is a privilege often tied to political reliability. Students are monitored, professors pressured to teach correct ideology. Yet universities also bring ideas together. Underground reading groups form, forbidden art circulates. Small protests sometimes flicker before being crushed. Young minds hunger for truth and connection, even while watching carefully for informants. Despite everything, childhood under the Iron Curtain is not without wonder. Friendships bloom, first loves happen, summer trips to the countryside bring fresh air and freedom. Children play in courtyards, swim in rivers, chase each other through city streets. Imagination finds cracks in the walls of ideology. Secret games mimic spies and border escapes, half fear and half adventure. Dreams of distant places, Paris, New York, freedom itself, fill quiet hours. Even in a system designed to mold obedience, the human heart keeps its curiosity. Yet the state's reach leaves lasting marks. Generations learn to measure their words, to hide thoughts, to separate public self from private self. They learn that power listens and that safety lies in silence. Some grow up believing deeply in the ideals taught at school, only to feel betrayed when reality proves harsher. Others grow cynical early, seeing through the slogans before adolescence ends. All carry some imprint of that red scarf, that portrait on the classroom wall, that morning ritual of pledging loyalty before they fully understood what it meant. By the time these children become adults, they are practicing caution, but also quietly strong. They know how to survive within a system that does not welcome dissent. They know how to find small freedoms without drawing attention. Some will one day use these skills to push back, to protest, to demand change when cracks widen. Others will simply pass on the wisdom to their own children, speak softly, think clearly, and keep hope alive even when you cannot show it. As night falls, the small student who left with a scarf and a patched notebook returns home tired but safe. Homework waits, and perhaps a whispered story from a parent about the world beyond the official map. The apartment smells of cabbage soup and coal smoke, but there is comfort here. Another day of lessons is done. Another day of careful listening and quiet dreams. Childhood continues, shaped but not fully claimed by the state. This is life for the young behind the Iron Curtain, a childhood of ritual and ideology, of scarce supplies and quiet rebellion, of learning to navigate a world where words are weighed but imagination still sneaks through. It is a childhood cautious yet alive, prepared for survival but still daring, in secret, to hope. Part 6. Warm Kitchens and Hidden Worlds. Evening comes early in a land of long winters and slow clocks. Outside, the streets are damp and dark. a thin fog rolling between apartment blocks built of poured concrete. Inside, small worlds bloom behind heavy curtains and bolted doors. This is where life finds its truest rhythm, not in parades or party meetings, but in kitchens that smell of simmering soup, and living rooms lit by soft lamps and quiet laughter. Here, people build private havens far from the eyes and ears of the state. The entrance to an apartment is often narrow and plain, a scuffed stairwell echoing with footsteps. But cross the threshold and a different world appears. Shoes are lined up neatly. Coats hang from improvised hooks. A low table holds photographs, some of family, some of places long gone, some of loved ones lost to war or silence. The warmth hits you first. The coal or wood stove burning steadily, the smell of cabbage rolls, bread, or roasted beets lingering from supper. A radio murmurs softly if it feels safe to let it play. In these small spaces, families carve out dignity. Furniture is patched but polished. Lace doilies soften worn chairs. Houseplants grow on windowsills. A single bright tablecloth, carefully saved for special occasions, might cover the kitchen table even on an ordinary night because beauty matters. Children sprawl on rugs, drawing or playing quiet games. Parents sit close, drinking tea or perhaps something stronger. It is here in these modest rooms that people breathe freely, at least as freely as one dares. Conversation flows differently inside. Voices are low, but warmer than outside. Parents speak of daily struggles, the line at the bakery, the shortage of fuel, the unexpected kindness of a neighbor who shared sugar or eggs. Politics rarely enter directly, though they hover like smoke at the edge of every word. Adults know which topics are safe and which could put the whole family at risk if overheard. Yet there are moments of daring, small, and carefully measured. A father might share a joke mocking the latest speech. A mother might recount a rumor about change somewhere beyond the border. Eyes flick toward the children to make sure they understand the rule. Nothing leaves this room. Hospitality, though modest, survives. A knock at the door might bring a cousin, a friend, or a neighbor carrying bread or a bottle of homemade fruit liqueur. Guests remove coats, warm their hands, and sit near the stove. Conversation turns to recipes, work, family news. Sometimes music drifts from a record player, state-approved folk songs, or, if trust is deep, a hidden Western record played low enough not to carry beyond the walls. The sound of forbidden jazz or rock and roll feels electric, dangerous but alive. Faces light up in ways they rarely can outside. These visits strengthen invisible networks. In a society where official institutions cannot always be trusted, neighbors become lifelines. They watch each other's children, trade selling for repairs, pass along tips about incoming goods. A cousin working in a warehouse might warn of a rare shipment arriving. A friend with access to a typewriter might copy a band book for quiet circulation. Favors move silently through these networks, creating bonds deeper than the slogans about collective spirit printed on posters. Food plays a central role in this private world. Kitchens hum with quiet industry, jars of pickled vegetables lined up like jewels, bread rising under towels, soups thickened with whatever is available. Holidays, Christmas for those who still celebrate quietly, New Year's for everyone, become feats of preparation. Families save sugar, flour, and meat for weeks to create feasts that defy scarcity. The table groans under cabbage rolls, roasted meats, sweet pastries, and fruit preserved from summer gardens. For one night, the gray world outside disappears. Candles flicker, glasses clink, and even the most cautious laugh freely. Children absorb these rituals with wonder. They know when to stay silent if politics surface, but they also feel the warmth of belonging. They watch mothers turn scraps into feasts and fathers fix broken furniture with patience and skill. They see neighbors arrive uninvited, but always welcome. They learn that survival is not just about obedience or caution, it is also about care, creativity, and quiet solidarity. Books fill shelves in these hidden worlds, though many are not supposed to. Alongside official histories and approved novels sit worn, beloved volumes passed down through families, classics untouched by ideology, poetry full of subtle resistance, translated works from beyond the curtain. Sometimes a foreign book arrives smuggled, read with reverence, and hidden quickly if strangers visit. Children grow up aware that words hold power, the kind of power the state fears. Faith lives quietly here too, even where it is discouraged. Crosses hang discreetly, icons are tucked behind curtains, candles burn on certain nights. In Poland, churches stay crowded. In other countries, worship survives more quietly within families. Prayer is whispered but enduring. Religious holidays continue behind closed doors, blending faith and cultural memory in ways that strengthen identity without attracting unwanted attention. Love flourishes in these spaces despite the grayness outside. Couples court carefully, often under the watch of families, but tenderness survives. Weddings, though simple, radiate joy. A borrowed suit, a dress sewn at home, a modest meal shared among friends. These celebrations feel defiant in their happiness. Laughter and music fill tiny rooms, and for a few hours no one thinks about shortages or surveillance. The newlyweds dance, believing in the future even if the world beyond the apartment walls remains uncertain. Evenings also bring secret listening. Radios tuned cautiously to foreign broadcasts carry whispers of another world, news of protests, stories of freedom, music too vibrant to be state-approved. The volume stays low, windows shut tight. Children are sometimes sent to bed early so adults can listen in peace. The risk is real, confiscation, interrogation, but curiosity outweighs fear. These broadcasts create invisible threads connecting isolated listeners across the East, letting them know they are not alone. Art quietly decorates these private worlds. Homemade embroidery, family photos, paintings by friends. Each small touch personalizes spaces that might otherwise feel uniform. Some households hang landscapes of mountains or sea, places that feel far away and free. Others keep framed photos of ancestors, a silent anchor to times before the state's gaze. Creativity flourishes even under constraint. It becomes an act of quiet resistance to make beauty where none is supplied. Stories travel here too. Parents and grandparents tell tales that predate ideology, village legends, war memories, family histories, folklore untainted by politics. These stories teach children resilience and identity beyond the party line. A grandfather may speak of fighting for survival during war, a grandmother of life before collectivization, a mother of relatives who fled or disappeared. Each story is a whispered reminder that the present order is not eternal. Friendship deepens in these hidden worlds because trust is rare and precious. When someone proves safe, the bond is powerful. Friends share more than goods. They share laughter, art, grief, and sometimes daring plans for a different future. In such friendships, people drop their masks. They talk honestly about shortages, about the absurdity of bureaucracy, about longing for travel and freedom. These conversations heal the quiet wounds inflicted by daily caution. Sometimes, danger slips even into these safe spaces. A trusted friend might turn out to be an informant, forced or willing. A careless remark might reach the wrong ear through bad luck. The betrayal cuts deep, not only because of the risk, but because it fractures the fragile islands of trust people have built. Yet most continue to risk it because a life without honesty and friendship is no life at all. Children raised in these homes grow into adults who understand complexity early. They learn to read rooms, to sense when to speak and when to stay silent, to hold private truths alongside public performance. They inherit their parents' quiet ingenuity, the ability to fix, to barter, to create joy from scarcity. They also inherit hope, though it is cautious, folded small and hidden until safer days. Nights in these apartments often end with small comforts. A final cup of tea, a candle extinguished, a sigh of relief that the day passed without trouble. The radio clicks off. The stove cools. Outside, the city is dark except for scattered lights in other windows, other families, other hidden worlds, living the same careful, resilient lives. Within each, love persists. Laughter flickers and quiet resistance hums like an underground current. This private sphere is what keeps people whole behind the Iron Curtain. Public life may belong to the state, the parades, the slogans, the factories, but the heart belongs here. Kitchens full of steam and story, living rooms alive with quiet music, friendships built on whispered trust. These are the places where humanity refuses to be crushed. Even as surveillance watches, shortages grind, and propaganda drones on, a deeper life endures behind closed doors. When you leave one of these apartments late at night, stepping back into the foggy street, you carry the warmth with you. You feel how fragile but powerful these hidden worlds are. They are not revolutions, but they are the soil from which future change might grow, spaces where truth, love, and hope are kept alive, waiting patiently for the day they can step back into the light. Part 7. Silent Altars and Secret Songs. Morning breaks quietly in a city where the church bells once rang loud and proud, but now sound subdued if they sound at all. The streets smell of damp stone and coal smoke as people hurry past buildings with faded frescoes and shuttered doors. Faith has not vanished, but it has learned to whisper. The state prefers silence about anything it cannot control, yet behind closed doors and within hearts, belief still lives. Alongside that quiet faith flows another current, music, art, and poetry that carry feelings the party cannot fully police. These invisible rivers nourish hope in places where open defiance would be crushed. Religious life under the Iron Curtain varies from place to place, but everywhere it must navigate caution. In Poland, churches remain crowded, their doors open despite surveillance. Priests walk a careful line, preaching morality and comfort while avoiding overt challenge to the regime. Mass is both worship and subtle resistance, a gathering of people who remember identities older than the party. In other countries, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, religion retreats deeper underground. Chapels are closed or turned into warehouses. Clergy are pressured to register with state offices and to preach loyalty alongside scripture. Some comply to survive. Others refuse and disappear into prisons or labor camps. Yet ordinary believers adapt with quiet creativity. Families baptize infants in secret, using kitchens instead of churches if needed. Weddings take place in whispered ceremonies, sometimes with a single trusted priest and a few witnesses. Holidays such as Christmas and Easter are celebrated behind curtains drawn tight. Songs are sung softly, candles lit where no one outside can see. In villages, old traditions survive disguised as folk customs. Caroling that is just music, feast days called family gatherings. People know the truth even when they rename it to stay safe. Faith becomes personal rather than public. A cross may be hidden in a drawer, an icon covered when guests arrive, a Bible read late at night by candlelight. Children learn prayers quietly from parents and grandparents. In some homes, religious instruction is a secret passed down like a family recipe, whispered, careful, but deeply cherished. The very act of believing becomes a quiet act of courage, a way of saying that there's a power greater than the party. Art takes on a similar double life. Official galleries and theaters display works that fit the socialist ideal. Heroic workers, smiling farmers, abstract forms that celebrate industry and progress. But artists find ways to slip truth through the cracks. Painters embed hidden symbols, a lone bird in an empty sky, a road that leads nowhere, faces half turned away from the viewer. Writers use allegory and metaphor to tell forbidden stories. A tale set in medieval times might be about tyranny in the present. A poem about winter might speak of political fear. Audiences learn to read between the lines. A single well-placed phrase can feel electric, alive with shared understanding. Music is perhaps the most rebellious of all. State radio plays marches, patriotic anthems, and carefully approved folk tunes. But in bedrooms and basements, young people tune old radios to foreign stations that hiss and crackle with life. Late at night, BBC, Voice of America, and Radio Free Europe bring jazz, rock, and news that break the monotony of official broadcasts. Listening is risky. A neighbor might hear, a knock might come, yet many cannot resist. They lower the volume, press their ears close to the speaker, and drink in each forbidden note as if it were water in a desert. Recordings circulate in secret. Western LPs smuggled across borders are copied onto reel-to-reel tapes, passed from hand to hand until the sound warps but the beat survives. In the Soviet Union, some even cut records onto discarded X-ray films, ghostly images of bones spinning on turntables, carrying songs by the Beatles or jazz legends. These bone records become symbols of youthful defiance, fragile, illegal, yet unstoppable. To hold one is to touch another world. Underground concerts sometimes take place in basements or abandoned halls. A friend of a friend whispers an address. Candles light the space. Homemade amplifiers hum. The music might be jazz, forbidden for its Western roots, or rock and roll, condemned as decadent. Dancing there feels dangerous and thrilling. For a few hours, young people shed the gray weight of conformity. They sway, sing, and shout quietly, knowing each beat is a small rebellion. Even official music can be subverted. Folk songs older than the regime carry double meanings. Lullabies become quiet protests. Classical concerts, though approved, give space for emotion beyond propaganda. A soaring violin or a mournful cello can say what words cannot. People leave theaters with tears in their eyes, comforted not just by beauty, but by the reminder that the human spirit outlives ideology. Writers and intellectuals keep hope alive too. Samizdat, self-published, typewritten manuscripts, circulates hand to hand. Someone with a typewriter copies a banned essay, then passes it to trusted friends who copy it again. Pages multiply like whispers. Each reader risks punishment but hungers for truth. Philosophers, historians, and poets, banned by the state, find audiences this way. The work may be slow, secret, and dangerous, but it keeps ideas alive. Sometimes the underground and official worlds collide. A play slips past censors with subtle criticism and becomes an instant legend, its lines repeated quietly on the streets. A song played at a state concert carries hidden meaning that the audience feels even if the officials do not. These moments of shared understanding create invisible bonds, reminding people they are not alone in seeing through the slogans. Youth culture becomes especially bold. Teenagers and young adults, less scarred by war and less patient with shortages, push boundaries through style and sound. They wear clothes inspired by Western magazines, style hair against official norms, and form small groups around music scenes. Authorities crack down, confiscating records, cutting hair, banning gatherings. Yet each crackdown only confirms that these small acts matter. A pair of jeans or a Beatles record becomes a flag of identity, proof that another life is possible. Faith and art do more than resist. They comfort. A candle lit on Christmas Eve, a hymn sung softly, a forbidden novel shared among friends. These moments sustain weary spirits. They offer meaning when politics feel empty. They give hope that truth and beauty can outlast oppression. Even those who have lost formal belief often cling to these rituals as lifelines, signs that the soul is more than a number in a state plan. Families nurture this quiet resistance in children without always naming it. A father plays a smuggled record while warning his son not to mention it at school. A mother whispers prayers over a sleeping child. A grandmother tells folk tales rich with moral courage. Over time, these small seeds grow into resilience, a sense that the world is larger and freer than the state admits. Authorities know this and respond with pressure. Clergy are watched, artists censored, musicians banned, writers arrested. Concerts are raided, underground presses seized, yet the effort never fully succeeds. Belief and creativity slip through cracks too small to seal. Each time the state tightens its grip, new ways of sharing appear. The human need for meaning is stubborn. In some countries, small cultural thawing occurs. Leaders seeking to appear modern allow limited artistic freedom or religious tolerance. A banned book is published in a cautious edition. A famous priest is allowed to preach under surveillance. A jazz festival is permitted to attract young people. These brief openings spark hope, but are fragile, often reversed when fear of unrest returns. Still, they show that even the regime senses the power of culture and cannot crush it completely. As night falls across the Eastern Bloc, the private worlds come alive again. Candles flicker on hidden altars. Soft hymns rise in kitchens turn chapels. In another apartment, a record spins slowly, its surface scratched but playing a song from across the ocean. Someone copies a poem onto thin paper, ready to pass it quietly to a friend. Teenagers lean close to radios, straining to hear music through static. The state may command parades and slogans, but it cannot fill every silence or reach every dream. Walk through the streets after dark and you can feel it. Behind each closed window lies a different small defiance. Some take the form of prayer, some of poetry, some of rhythm and song. Together they weave a fabric of inner life that refuses to be flattened. It is fragile, easily broken if betrayed, yet endlessly renewed. It keeps people human. This underground current of faith, art, and music will not overthrow the regime on its own, but it keeps alive the idea that life can be more than gray obedience. It preserves memory, hope, and identity until the day when cracks appear wide enough for change. For now, it is enough to light a candle, play a song, whisper a prayer, and know that you are not alone. Part 8. The Longing to Escape. Before dawn, the streets are empty and still, but somewhere behind shuttered windows a man lies awake, staring at the ceiling. His thoughts move like restless birds against the cage of his mind. He imagines roads that lead west, trains that cross borders, planes lifting into open skies. It is a dream shared by millions who live beneath the Iron Curtain, the quiet, persistent longing to step beyond the reach of watchtowers and walls, to breathe in a place where words are free and no file bears their name. For many, this longing begins not with politics, but with small human desires. A woman wants to visit family in Austria she has not seen since the war. A young man dreams of studying in Paris, where books are plentiful and professors speak without fear. A couple hopes to give their children a future with more choice and fewer lines. These are not grand conspiracies. They are ordinary hearts seeking open space. But in a world where borders harden into prison bars, ordinary dreams become dangerous. In the early post-war years, escape was still possible for those daring or lucky enough. Trains crossed into western zones before restrictions tightened. Families slipped across unguarded stretches of forest or river. Some never returned, beginning new lives in cities like Munich or Vienna. Their letters home, when they arrived at all, were treasured and feared, proof that another world existed, but also reminders of the risks. As the 1950s advanced, those paths closed. Barbed wire spread, checkpoints multiplied, passports were revoked. By the time the curtain was fully drawn, leaving became nearly impossible without official permission few could obtain. Still, people tried. Each attempt was a quiet gamble, with freedom on one side and prison or death on the other. Some forged documents, bribing border guards, or exploiting bureaucratic cracks. Others fled through mountains or forests, following whispered maps and secret guides. Rivers became treacherous highways of hope. In winter, fugitives trudged through snow and bitter cold, praying their footprints would not betray them. In summer, they risked drowning in strong currents or being shot from watchtowers if spotted mid-crossing. Families plotted for months or years. They gathered scraps of information, where fences were weakest, which guards were bribable, how to reach a sympathetic contact on the other side. Trusted friends might hide them for a night, provide false work papers, or arrange transport. Every word of planning was a risk. One informant could destroy everything. Fear sat heavy in every conversation. Yet the dream of freedom proved stronger for some than fear itself. Stories of successful escape became whispered legends. A student who swam across a border river under cover of darkness. A family who dug a tunnel from their cellar to the other side. Two brothers who built a hot air balloon from scavenged fabric and soared over fences into West Germany. Each tale sparked hope, but also danger. Authorities hunted down escape networks and punished helpers severely. Those caught could face years in prison, forced labor, or worse. Sometimes whole families were punished for the actions of one member. The Berlin Wall became the most famous symbol of this struggle. When it rose in 1961, first barbed wire, then concrete and guard towers, it turned the city into a wound. Families were split overnight. Friends found themselves on opposite sides, with no way back. At first, desperate East Berliners leapt from windows or sprinted through half-finished barricades. Some made it. Others fell under gunfire or were dragged back bleeding. As the wall grew taller and deadlier, escape attempts became fewer but more daring. Tunnels snaked under streets. Cars were modified with secret compartments. Forged passports passed hands in hidden rooms. Each successful crossing became a quiet triumph, whispered across neighborhoods hungry for hope. Even outside Berlin, the curtain bristled with watchtowers and minefields. Along the Hungarian-Austrian border, electric fences hummed. In Czechoslovakia, soldiers patrolled forested frontiers with dogs. The Black Sea coast was monitored for swimmers or makeshift boats. Yet the desire to leave never disappeared. It lived in students who longed to see the West, and artists stifled by censorship, and families tired of fear. Sometimes it took years for longing to become action, but the thought rarely died once planted. For many who stayed, escape became an inner journey instead. People turned to books, music, and imagination to travel where their feet could not. A smuggled magazine could carry someone to Parisian streets. A Western song heard through static could make a teenager feel part of a global youth culture. Daydreams soared over fences no one could climb in real life. In kitchens and secret gatherings, people spoke quietly of someday, the day borders might open, the day they might travel without fear. The regime tried to blunt this yearning with both fear and reward. Travel permits were granted sparingly to trusted citizens, usually older or tied to official delegations. Cultural exchanges were tightly controlled, but enough to suggest that obedience might earn a glimpse of the world beyond. Propaganda painted the West as decadent and cruel, a place of poverty and crime. Films showed unemployed workers and lonely wanderers to convince citizens they were safer at home. Some believed it, at least partly. Others laughed bitterly at the obvious exaggeration. A different kind of escape appeared in humor. Jokes about borders and guards circulated quietly. The man who digs under the fence and comes up on the wrong side. The dog that wants to defect because here I have to bark the party line. Laughter was both relief and rebellion. It gave voice to frustration without inviting open punishment, though even jokes could be dangerous if told to the wrong ear. Occasionally, cracks opened. In 1956, Hungary erupted in revolution, and for a few brief weeks the border with Austria loosened. Thousands fled westward before Soviet tanks returned. In 1968, when Czechoslovakia tried reform in the Prague Spring, some managed to escape before troops arrived to crush hope. Each time, the regime learned and tightened control further, yet the taste of freedom lingered, whispered from those who made it out to those left behind. The longing to escape also changed shape over time. By the 1970s, some no longer dreamed of fleeing forever, but simply of visiting freely, to study, to see relatives, to travel for work. The fact that even short, harmless trips were forbidden sharpened resentment. Young people wanted to see concerts, beaches, universities abroad. Parents wanted to reunite with family lost to new borders. These simple desires, denied by walls and papers, became powerful fuel for quiet dissatisfaction. And yet, life demanded pragmatism. Most stayed. They built homes, careers, and families despite the barriers. They learned to live fully in the space allowed, to find happiness in friendships, music, and love. Some buried their longing deep, telling themselves that stability was worth the cost. Others kept it alive, a private ember glowing for decades. When at last the curtain began to weaken in the late 1980s, it was these long-nurtured dreams that pushed millions to move, march, and demand change. For now, though, in the decades when the curtain still feels immovable, the longing remains mostly silent. A man wakes before dawn and imagines a road that crosses to freedom. A teenager listens to forbidden music and dreams of cities she has only seen in smuggled magazines. A mother tells her children about cousins they may never meet. These are quiet acts of hope, not loud enough to shatter the wall, but strong enough to keep the spirit alive. Walk the streets at night and you can feel this invisible tide. It moves beneath the gray buildings, through factories and classrooms, through kitchens glowing with hidden life. It does not march or shout, it waits. It is the hope of movement, of open skies, of living without fear of watchtowers. It is the unspoken answer to every locked border. And though the state tries to silence it, The longing to escape hums quietly in the hearts of those who dream beyond the curtain. Part 9. The Weight of Watchful Eyes. Night presses softly over the city, but the feeling is not restful. Somewhere a dog barks once and then falls silent. A tram screeches on its rails and fades into the distance. Inside a modest apartment, a man closes the curtains and lowers his voice even though only family is present. The day's news has carried another speech about loyalty and vigilance. Once again, everyone is reminded that enemies of the people could be anywhere. It is a warning that has echoed for years now, until it has become a constant background hum, as familiar as the smell of coal smoke or the sight of gray apartment blocks. Surveillance here is not only about devices or officers, it is about atmosphere. The state has built a presence so pervasive that it seems to live inside walls, behind radios, in the pauses between sentences. Even when no one is actually listening, people feel they might be. That feeling shapes behavior long before punishment ever arrives. Voices drop. Jokes die before they are spoken. A thought is tested silently before anyone dares to share it. It is a quiet, relentless pressure, and it molds entire generations. Everyday life looks ordinary on the surface. Children go to school, workers clock in at factories, trams clatter past billboards with smiling leaders. But underneath, caution guides every interaction. A neighbor's sudden promotion might mean he reports to the secret police. A coworker's curiosity about your opinions might not be innocent. A friend's invitation to talk politics might be a trap set out of fear, duty, or a desperate attempt to protect themselves. Trust exists, but it grows slowly and only after careful testing. Inside government offices, the surveillance system is methodical. Files are built on citizens, their workplaces, their families, their reading habits, their conversations. Letters are opened and resealed. Phones are tapped when suspicion rises. Informants, teachers, clerks, even janitors are recruited quietly and promised safety or small favors in return. Some are motivated by ideology, believing they serve the greater good. Many are coerced, threatened with losing jobs, homes, or children if they refuse. Others cooperate for better rations or a chance at travel permits. Whatever the reason, the result is a society where anyone might be watching. The fear is not abstract. People know what can happen. An uncle was called in for questioning and came back days later pale and silent, refusing to speak about what he endured. A coworker disappeared after being overheard criticizing production quotas. A teacher was suddenly replaced, rumored to have said something dangerous in class. Each story is a warning that spreads quickly and quietly, reinforcing the lesson: be careful. At night, in the privacy of home, families discuss these things in whispers. Parents warn children never to repeat what is said at the dinner table. Children learn early that honesty can be dangerous. They sense the difference between what is spoken inside and outside. In some homes, this creates a double language, the official phrases one must say at school and the private truth reserved for family. It is a survival skill passed down like an heirloom. Workplaces are carefully monitored too. Factories have political officers who attend meetings and report the mood of the workers. Offices hold mandatory study sessions on ideology where employees listen to speeches or read party text aloud. Participation is expected, enthusiasm noted. Those who ask too many questions or appear uninterested risk being labeled unreliable. Promotions often depend as much on loyalty as on skill. To climb higher, one must know how to speak the party's language and hide dissent. Travel within the country can also be watched. Police may stop and ask for identification papers. Certain jobs require permission to move between regions. Hotels report guests to local authorities. Letters from abroad are examined. A simple visit to relatives in another town might attract questions if done too often or without clear reason. The message is constant. The state sees you. Yet for all its reach, surveillance is not perfect. People find cracks. Conversations happen in parks where trees absorb sound. Letters are coded in family jokes only the sender and receiver understand. Trusted friends share forbidden music or ideas in small, careful circles. Sometimes even an official file becomes a shield. If one is already suspected but survives, others may hesitate to denounce them further. Living under watch teaches a strange kind of craft, how to be visible enough to seem obedient, but invisible enough to stay safe. Humor becomes a survival tool. Satirical jokes about bureaucracy, shortages, or leaders spread quietly despite risk. Telling the right joke to the right person can build trust, but the wrong audience can mean interrogation. People learn to read faces before laughing. Even jokes carry weight here, as both connection and possible danger. Children, especially teenagers, feel the tension acutely. They are taught loyalty in school, but sense the unease at home. Some rebel in small ways, wearing Western-inspired clothes, listening to forbidden music, drawing graffiti that mocks slogans. Others become informants, pressured or tempted by teachers and officials. A single careless confession to a friend might return home through the teacher's office. Parents carry the quiet heartbreak of knowing their own child could be used against them without fully understanding the harm. The secret police also manipulate fear strategically. Occasional public trials or news of arrests remind everyone of the consequences of dissent. Sometimes a neighbor's sudden fall is less about guilt than about sending a message. Punishment does not need to reach everyone. It only needs to be visible enough to keep most obedient. The threat of being watched works even when no one is actually watching. Still, life under watch is not only fear. People carve out safe spaces, however small. In kitchens, trust slowly builds. Music played quietly, books shared, conversations whispered. These are tiny sanctuaries where honesty breathes. Friendship is tested but deeply rewarding when real. Love grows carefully but stubbornly. Faith endures in secret. Even under surveillance, people remain human. Sometimes the watchers are also weary humans. An officer reading intercepted letters might feel pity. A low-level informant might warn a friend quietly of danger. The system depends on countless ordinary people, some of whom doubt or quietly resist. These small acts of compassion, though often invisible, help others survive. Despite everything, the desire for truth keeps moving. Forbidden literature is copied and hidden. Underground presses work at night. A banned philosopher's words find their way into student circles. Musicians write songs with coded meanings. Artists paint images that slip past censors but speak to those who know how to look. Surveillance tries to smother these sparks, but each spark lights another. Over the decades, this constant watchfulness shapes a population both cautious and quietly defiant. People become experts at reading the air, at living double lives, at protecting their private selves. They grow skeptical of slogans and promises, yet skilled at survival. Some sink into resignation, but others hold on to hope, nurturing it quietly for years. When cracks eventually appear in the system, it will be these long-trained observers who know how to move carefully and push when it matters. As night deepens, the man staring at the ceiling finally turns onto his side. He has said little all day beyond safe words. He has smiled when expected, nodded at slogans, endured another work meeting about production and loyalty. Yet in the privacy of his own mind, he keeps alive a small, fierce truth that beyond the walls and watchtowers there is a wider world, and that even here, under constant eyes, he is still himself. Tomorrow he will wake and perform the cautious dance again. But tonight, in silence, he remembers his freedom within. Walk through the sleeping city and you can sense this inner life everywhere. Behind each curtained window lives someone measuring every word, protecting every thought, and still dreaming. Surveillance may be vast, but it is not absolute. It cannot erase hope or love or the quiet knowledge that one day the eyes may close and the world will open again. Part 10. Cracks in the Curtain. Morning rises pale and cold, but the streets feel subtly different. The posters still hang, the parades still march, the slogans still echo, yet beneath it all something stirs, a quiet shift in breath, a faint tremor in the stone weight of control. For decades, the Iron Curtain has seemed immovable. Its watchtowers and secret files have kept people careful. Yet control is never perfect, and time has a way of eroding even the strongest walls. By the late 1950s and into the 1960s, the first small cracks begin to appear. It starts almost invisibly. A factory meeting where workers grumble louder than usual, a poet reading a piece that carries too much truth between its lines, students whispering about reform while pretending to study ideology. The system is built on the assumption that fear will keep everyone silent, but shortages keep biting, corruption grows obvious, and the bright promises of socialism feel dull against daily grayness. People who have lived for years under watch begin to question not only in private, but cautiously in public. The first tremor shakes the heart of the system in 1953, when Joseph Stalin dies. Across the Eastern Bloc, his portraits have watched over every classroom and office. His name has been spoken with ritual reverence. His sudden death leaves a strange silence. In Moscow, leaders struggle to redefine power. In satellite nations, uncertainty spreads. Some citizens dare to hope that the tightest controls might loosen. In East Germany, this hope bursts into the streets. Workers in Berlin go on strike over work quotas and poor conditions. What begins as an economic protest grows into a wider call for freedom. For a few brief days, the city trembles with possibility. Soviet tanks roll in to crush it quickly, but the memory lingers, proof that people can still rise even under watchful eyes. In Poland and Hungary, similar undercurrents stir. Poland's workers strike repeatedly in the 1950s, demanding better wages and less political interference. In Hungary, the tension is sharper. Intellectuals and students push for reform, for more openness, for freedom from Moscow's grip. In October 1956, the country erupts. Crowds flood Budapest streets, tearing down statues of Stalin, demanding free elections and an end to Soviet control. For a brief, breathtaking moment, it seemed the curtain might tear open. But Moscow sends tanks and troops. The uprising is drowned in blood and silence. Thousands die. Thousands more flee west in a desperate wave before borders slam shut again. The lesson is harsh. Defiance is possible, but costly. Yet it also plants a seed. People have seen the power of collective courage, and they will remember. Czechoslovakia carries that seed forward into the 1960s. A new generation of leaders promises socialism with a human face, loosening censorship and allowing more open discussion. Writers, artists, and students fill Prague with vibrant debate and hope. Cafes buzz with talk of reform. Theaters stage plays long considered too bold. For a season, it feels like a thaw. Then in August 1968, the Soviet Union and its allies roll tanks into Prague. The streets fill with peaceful resistance, students placing flowers in soldiers' rifles, crowds blocking tanks with their bodies, but the crackdown is swift. The Prague Spring ends in smoke and fear. Once again, a window to freedom closes, but not without leaving deep memory. In Poland, resistance reshapes itself more quietly. Intellectual circles form underground networks, discussing democracy and rights. Workers organize secretly, despite the risk. The Catholic Church, already a refuge, strengthens its role as a source of national identity and quiet defiance. By the 1970s, these threads will grow into the powerful solidarity movement, though for now they remain careful and fragile. While uprisings are dramatic, subtler cracks appear in everyday life. Corruption seeps through the system. Party officials enjoy privileges, better apartments, special shops, access to Western goods, while ordinary citizens wait in endless lines. This hypocrisy erodes faith in the slogans of equality. Everyone sees the difference between official images of plenty and the reality of shortage. A quiet cynicism spreads. People still march when required, but the enthusiasm is hollow. Information, though tightly controlled, begins to slip through. Radios pull in foreign news. Smuggled books and magazines circulate. Travelers, rare but influential, return with stories of a freer world. Technology, even in primitive form, helps ideas move faster than censors can block them. Each forbidden song or article plants another seed of doubt. Young people feel these cracks keenly. They have grown up under slogans, but see the failure of promises. They long for travel, for music, for color beyond gray propaganda. They copy Western fashions, form underground rock bands, and share band literature. Their parents, shaped by war and fear, urge caution. But the young test limits, sometimes paying the price in arrests or ruined careers. Still, each act of small rebellion pushes the line a little further. Religion remains a deep well of quiet resistance, especially where the church holds strong roots. Services become more than worship. They are gatherings where truth feels alive. Sermons skirt the edges of politics, speaking of dignity and hope without naming names. Pilgrimages, festivals, and holy days draw huge crowds, showing the regime that belief cannot be fully erased. In 1978, the election of a Polish Pope, John Paul II, will electrify the region, but even before that moment, faith keeps people standing. The secret police tighten efforts in response. Files grow thicker, listening devices multiply, informants increase. Yet fear is harder to maintain when the system itself shows cracks. Each failed reform, each visible hypocrisy, each brave act of defiance weakens the spell. Surveillance is powerful, but cannot stop disappointment from turning into quiet rebellion. For ordinary citizens, this is a confusing, dangerous time. They want change, but remember tanks in Budapest and Prague. They crave freedom, but fear prison. Many continue the careful double life, obedience outside, honesty inside, but the private truth grows louder. Conversations in kitchens become more daring, jokes sharper, music bolder. Hope no longer sleeps. It stirs restlessly, waiting. Economic pressure deepens the unrest. Planned economies struggle to keep pace with needs. Shortages grow worse, queues longer. Promised prosperity never fully arrives. People see the contrast between thriving Western neighbors and their own stagnation. The television may denounce the West, but glimpses of shiny cars and full markets leak through. Dissatisfaction becomes harder to silence when stomachs and ambitions remain empty. Even within the party, doubts form. Reform-minded leaders rise occasionally, promising change only to be crushed or forced back into line. Yet their appearance signals something important. Cracks exist not just among citizens, but inside the system itself. Some officials quietly sympathize with reformers or look away from small acts of defiance. Power is no longer monolithic, even if it pretends to be. By the 1970s, an invisible tide is building. It does not yet have the strength to sweep away the curtain, but it reshapes the world behind it. People know the truth more clearly than ever. The promises have failed. Fear is still real, but less absolute. A generation grows up skilled in quiet resistance, hungry for something more. When change finally comes in the 1980s, it will not be sudden magic. It will be the culmination of these long, patient years. For now, though, life continues in its strange duality. Public squares still fill with red flags. Leaders still give speeches about unity and progress. Children still recite loyalty oaths at school. But behind closed doors, the conversations have changed. People talk more openly about the lies they see, the better life they imagine, the courage of those who dare to stand up. Hope is no longer a secret ember. It is a quiet, growing flame. Walk the evening streets and you can feel the difference. The fear remains, but it shares space now with something new, a cautious, watchful defiance. In apartments glowing with hidden life, radios play forbidden songs louder than before. Friends speak a little more freely. Students pass books without trembling hands. The curtain still stands, but the first cracks are there for anyone willing to look closely, and many do, holding on to the fragile, powerful belief that one day the wall will fall. Part 11: Underground Currents. The 1970s arrived not with sudden freedom, but with a slow, restless energy. On the surface, the world behind the Iron Curtain appears unchanged. Red banners still stretch across city squares, leaders still speak of progress, and parades march on schedule. But beneath this choreography, something is shifting. Years of quiet discontent, secret music, and whispered truths have woven invisible networks. They are fragile and scattered, yet alive, like roots spreading unseen beneath cracked pavement, waiting for a moment to push through. Factories still dominate the landscape. Each morning, workers file past posters urging greater production. Loudspeakers blare cheerful statistics about steel and harvest, but few believe them anymore. Machines break, spare parts are missing, and corruption schemes resources before they reach the floor. Wages stagnate while prices creep higher. In break rooms, workers complain more openly now, though still with care. Everyone knows the risk of an informant nearby, yet frustration leaks out in grumbles and jokes. It is harder to fear a system that cannot even keep its own promises. Students gather in cafes, university corridors, or cramped apartments, talking about philosophy, art, and the world beyond their borders. They pass around typewritten essays and forbidden books, works of Orwell, Solzhenitsyn, Camus, or local dissidents whose names are banned from official pages. Samizdat circulates like underground electricity, a carbon-copied article here, a smuggled journal there, each page read until the ink fades. Owning these texts is risky, but reading them feels like breathing clean air after years of smoke. Religious communities grow bolder, too, especially in places where faith has deep roots. In Poland, churches are full every Sunday. Priests speak carefully but firmly about human dignity and moral courage. They do not call for revolution, but their words remind listeners of a truth larger than any regime. Pilgrimages draw thousands, turning roads into rivers of quiet resistance. In Czechoslovakia and Hungary, faith moves more cautiously but persists. Families still baptize children, celebrate Easter and Christmas, and teach prayers in secret. Belief becomes a steady heartbeat against the state's cold rationality. Music remains a potent undercurrent. Rock bands form in basements and garages, recording on homemade equipment. Lyrics hide subtle defiance, metaphors of cages, roads, and distant skies. Concerts happen unofficially in warehouses or fields, often broken up by police, but always returning somewhere else. Western records circulate in secret, some taped from radio broadcasts, others smuggled by travelers. For young people, each forbidden song is a taste of another world, a quiet declaration that gray conformity is not all there is. Art and theater follow the same path. Painters create works that seem harmless but hold deeper meaning. Broken chains hidden in abstract strokes, lone figures walking toward light. Playwrights craft allegories so sharp that audiences sit in electric silence, catching every unspoken word. Censors ban what they can, but artists learn to slip past rules with subtlety and wit. Each performance becomes an act of shared knowing between stage and audience, a silent nod that says we see the truth, even if we cannot say it outright. Technology, though limited, aids this underground movement. Copy machines, once rare and tightly controlled, begin to appear in offices and schools. Brave souls use them after hours to reproduce banned texts. Cassette recorders copy speeches and songs. Radios improve, catching Western broadcasts with less static. A world the regime tries to block seeps through cracks, in waves of sound and words. Economics quietly fuel dissent. The promised prosperity never arrives. Instead, shortages worsen. Queues lengthen, and the favored few continue to enjoy privileges. Special shops, stocked with imported goods, cater to officials while ordinary citizens struggle. Everyone sees this double standard. It breeds cynicism deeper than fear. People go through the motions, the parades, the slogans, but with hollow eyes and heavy hearts. Poland becomes a beacon of this growing undercurrent. In 1970, workers on the Baltic coast rise in protest against price hikes. The government responds with violence, killing dozens, but the shock lingers. By the late 1970s, intellectuals and workers begin to unite in ways the regime cannot easily crush. Small committees document human rights abuses, publish underground bulletins, and build networks of support. It is slow and dangerous work, but it grows quietly stronger year by year. Then, in 1978, something extraordinary happens. A Polish pope is elected. Karol Wojtyła, now John Paul II, steps onto the balcony in Rome and smiles with warmth the whole East can feel. His election electrifies Poland and echoes across the bloc. The idea that one of their own, raised under the same restrictions, now speaks freely to the world fills people with pride and daring. When he visits Poland in 1979, millions gather in the streets, praying openly, listening to words about dignity and truth. The state cannot stop it. For a moment, fear cracks. People realize how many they are. Elsewhere, other movements take root. In Czechoslovakia, intellectuals issue Charter 77, a simple document demanding human rights already promised on paper. Signing it is dangerous. Signers lose jobs, face harassment, or prison, but the act inspires. In Hungary, reformist economists and writers cautiously propose change, testing the limits of censorship. In East Germany, small Protestant groups begin to gather for peace prayers and discussions, sowing seeds that will one day grow into mass protests. These are not revolutions yet. They are patient, quiet, and often crushed or mocked. But they mark a profound change. For the first time since tanks crushed Budapest and Prague, organized, visible dissent survives, even if under constant harassment. People learn that it is possible to stand up, however carefully. Each success, a newsletter printed, a meeting held, a concert played, chips away at the myth of total control. Ordinary citizens feel the difference even if they do not join. A worker might not read Samizdat or attend underground church, but he hears that someone, somewhere, is pushing back. A mother might not sign petitions, but tells her children about the Pope's visit with pride. Teenagers grow bolder with music and style. Fear still rules, but it is no longer absolute. It must compete with quiet hope. The secret police respond with predictable weight. More informants are recruited, more files compiled. Phones are tapped, typewriters tracked, houses searched. But repression now feels less invincible. Each arrest sparks more quiet sympathy than fear. People whisper about those who dared, admire their courage, and resent the cruelty of punishment. Even some inside the system begin to doubt. Economically, the 1980s loom like a gathering storm. Debt grows as regimes borrow from the West to maintain appearances of prosperity. Factories lag behind global technology. Shelves stay thin. Citizens travel more carefully and return with sharper contrast between propaganda and reality. Information seeps faster than ever, despite efforts to block it. The state can no longer fully seal the border of the mind. Through it all, the underground current flows steadily. In basements, churches, hidden print shops, and whispered conversations, truth and creativity refuse to die. They do not yet have the force to tear the curtain apart, but they weaken its foundations with each passing year. Ordinary people, long experts at survival, become quiet experts at resistance too. On an ordinary night in 1979, you might see the signs if you look closely. A family listens to a papal speech recorded on cassette, windows shut tight. A group of students gathers in a cramped kitchen to discuss a band novel. A rock band rehearses in a garage, lyrics coated with longing. A worker lights a candle for friends lost to police violence and whispers a prayer for freedom. None of this is loud or public, but together it is powerful. Walk the streets after curfew and you can feel it, a subtle, rising hum under the gray silence. The posters still hang, but fewer eyes believe them. The parades still march, but the enthusiasm feels hollow. The curtain still stands, yet the ground beneath it trembles with quiet life. The long years of fear have taught people how to endure. Now those same skills teach them how to resist. It is not revolution yet, but it is movement. And once people begin to move, even walls of steel can someday fall. Part 12. The Great Unraveling begins. Winter winds sweep across the Baltic coast, rattling the windows of shipyards where men and women work through cold so sharp it bites their hands. Steel hulls ring beneath hammers, sparks flare against gray sky, and for decades, nothing has seemed capable of breaking this rhythm. Yet in the summer of 1980, something changes. Inside these yards in Gdansk, Poland, workers decide they have endured enough. Endless shortages, corrupt party bosses, food price hikes that make feeding a family impossible. One morning they refuse to work. The strike begins quietly, but soon it will shake the entire Eastern Bloc. Life across the Iron Curtain at the dawn of the 1980s is weary. The promises of socialism have long dulled. Factories limp along with outdated machines, making goods nobody wants or that quickly fall apart. Shelves stay bare. Black markets flourish while official shops remain gray and empty. Special stores feed the privileged party officials, secret police, favored professionals, while ordinary people wait in lines for hours only to find nothing left. Television still speaks of progress, but the disconnect between image and reality is glaring. People know when they are being lied to, and the lies have become too thin to hold. Poland feels this strain most sharply. Its economy falters, debt to Western banks spirals, and price increases ignite anger. Workers, long used to grumbling quietly, start talking openly about change. In August 1980, led by a shipyard electrician named Lech Walesa, they form an independent union, something unprecedented under communism. They call it solidarity. At first, it is a labor movement demanding fair wages and better conditions, but it quickly grows into something larger, a national voice for dignity, truth, and a different future. The strikes spread from Gdansk to mines, factories, schools. Millions join or support the movement. The government, stunned by the scale and fearful of Soviet intervention, negotiates rather than immediately crushes it. For a moment, the unthinkable happens. A legal, independent trade union exists in a communist state. Ordinary people feel the weight of history shift. Fear does not disappear, but it cracks. Conversations once whispered now flow more freely. In homes and workplaces, hope feels suddenly possible, not just a secret ember. Moscow watches nervously. The Soviet Union, under Leonid Brezhnev, has long enforced conformity by force, as it did in Hungary and Czechoslovakia. But the 1980s are not the 1950s. The USSR itself is struggling, its economy stagnating, its citizens restless, its military stretched by costly adventures like Afghanistan. Crushing Poland outright risks chaos and global backlash. Instead, Moscow pressures the Polish leadership to reassert control. Martial law arrives in December 1981. Tanks roll through Polish streets once again. Solidarity is banned. Leaders arrested. Meetings crushed. For a time, darkness returns. The movement goes underground. Strikes end under threat of prison. Yet something irreversible has happened. Solidarity survives as an idea, a network of people who have tasted their own power. Its underground press continues, its leaders continue to inspire, and its very existence proves the system can be challenged. Even as martial law restores surface order, the regime's aura of invincibility has cracked. Elsewhere, similar undercurrents strengthen. In Czechoslovakia, Charter 77 keeps documenting abuses despite harassment. Dissidents hold salons and apartments, discussing rights and democracy. In Hungary, reform-minded economists quietly push for market experiments, softening strict central control. In East Germany, small Protestant groups continue peace prayers, drawing young people hungry for change. These movements are fragmented and fragile, but their persistence matters. The fear that once silenced everything now must compete with lived proof that resistance, though dangerous, can survive. The cultural underground flourishes alongside activism. Samizdat presses multiply, filling kitchens and basements with the hum of typewriters and the sharp smell of carbon paper. Banned books and essays circulate faster than the secret police can seize them. Western music moves on cassettes, carried by travelers and copied endlessly. Young people trade tapes of rock, punk, and new wave. Fashion becomes bolder. Jeans, leather jackets, haircuts that break dull uniformity. Police crack down, but style is a rebellion that can't be fully jailed. faith grows stronger too, especially in Poland under the moral weight of John Paul II. His visits draw millions, oceans of candles, and quiet prayer turning into defiant unity. He speaks of human dignity, of fear not being the final word. Even those who are not deeply religious feel strengthened. A force beyond the state is speaking directly to them, urging courage without guns or tanks. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union itself begins to falter. Its leadership ages, Brezhnev, then Andropov and Chernenko, rule with little vitality. Economically, the empire strains under inefficiency and massive military spending. Afghanistan becomes its own quagmire. Western technology races ahead while Eastern factories lag decades behind. Ordinary Soviet citizens face empty shelves and crumbling housing just like their Eastern European neighbors. The myth of unstoppable progress collapses under lived experience. Then, in 1985, a new figure appears, Mikhail Gorbachev. Younger, energetic, he promises reform, glasnost, openness, and perestroika, restructuring. His goal is to save socialism by modernizing it, but his words unleash forces far beyond his control. Across the bloc, people hear that even in Moscow the air is changing. If the Soviet Union itself now speaks of openness, why must satellites remain frozen? Censorship loosens slightly, discussions broaden. The press experiments with more honesty. Fear wavers. In Poland, solidarity resurges underground, feeding on this shift. In Hungary, economic reform accelerates. In Czechoslovakia, dissidents grow bolder. Even East Germans, long among the most tightly controlled, feel winds of change as small protests begin. The 1980s become a decade of slow but unstoppable erosion. The wall has not fallen, but it is cracking from inside. Ordinary life during these years remains hard. Shortages persist, lines stretch, apartments crumble. But conversations change tone. People speak of when rather than only if. Students dream of studying abroad without whispers. Workers grumble louder, knowing strikes once shook an empire. Church services swell beyond ritual. They feel like gatherings of quiet power. Music gets louder, riskier. Artists test censorship more boldly. And sometimes the censors, exhausted or uncertain, let things pass. Surveillance remains, but its grip feels less absolute. The secret police still watch, but their power seems brittle compared to the 1950s. Files grow, but so does the number of people willing to risk them. Jokes about the party become openly shared in workplaces. Even some officials quietly sympathize with reform. Fear still exists. Arrests, harassment, and prison are real, but courage spreads like a slow dawn. For families who endured decades of silence, this is both exhilarating and frightening. Parents warn children to stay careful. They remember tanks and blood. But children, now adults, want more. They believe change is possible because they have seen cracks appear and survive. They have danced to forbidden songs, read banned books, joined secret meetings. Their caution is tempered by hunger for a different life. The state responds with uneven force, sometimes harsh, sometimes hesitant. Leaders know the old methods no longer guarantee obedience. Economic collapse looms, foreign debt weighs heavily. Western television, radio, and smuggled videotapes show ordinary people what life could be like beyond the curtain. Even propaganda loses its voice when refrigerators stay empty and the future feels stalled. In homes, hope and caution wrestle nightly. People still close curtains, but they talk more openly. They dream aloud about travel, free speech, democracy, They wonder if the world might truly change within their lifetime. The thought feels dangerous but intoxicating. After so many years of silent endurance, the possibility of real change is almost unimaginable, and yet it grows more real with each year. Walk through the streets in 1988 and you see the signs if you know where to look. Graffiti appears on walls, subtle but defiant. Crowds gather for vigils and peace prayers, candles glowing softly in the dark. A young couple holds hands while wearing Western band shirts in full view of police. Older workers grumble openly in bread lines. Fear is still here, but it no longer rules alone. Something deeper moves. A quiet, unstoppable current born from decades of patience, creativity, and hope. The great unraveling of the Iron Curtain has begun, though few can yet imagine how quickly the final collapse will come. The system still looks solid, but its foundation is crumbling. The secret networks of thought and courage built in kitchens and churches, in shipyards and student rooms are rising toward the surface. Change is not yet safe, but it is no longer unthinkable. The gray world trembles, and for the first time in a lifetime, the future feels open. Part 13. The walls begin to tremble. Autumn settles across Europe, cold and damp, yet in the streets of cities long subdued there is a new energy that cannot be hidden. In the shipyards of Gdansk, the underground press prints leaflets by night and smuggles them out at dawn. In Leipzig, worshippers gather for quiet Monday prayers that spill out of churches and into public squares. In Budapest, cautious reformers meet openly now, less afraid than they were even a year before. The great machine of control still grinds on. The files, the propaganda, the secret police, but its sound no longer drowns out the murmurs rising from below. By the late 1980s, the Iron Curtain is still standing, but it is trembling. The Soviet Union itself is faltering. Mikhail Gorbachev's reforms of glasnost and perestroika have loosened the once rigid hold of censorship and fear. He wants to save socialism, not destroy it, but his policies crack open doors long sealed. Newspapers publish criticism that would once have meant prison. Citizens debate openly in a way unseen for decades. The Kremlin, once the unquestioned enforcer of orthodoxy, now warns that it will no longer invade to prop up failing regimes. This single shift changes everything. Without the guarantee of Soviet tanks, Eastern European leaders find themselves suddenly exposed. Poland feels the wave first. Though martial law had once crushed solidarity, the movement never died. Underground networks persisted, passing leaflets, organizing secret strikes, and keeping hope alive in kitchens, churches, and clandestine meetings. When Gorbachev signals a new tolerance for reform, the Polish government can no longer maintain its brittle control. In 1988 and 1989, strikes swell again. Workers walk out, students protest, intellectuals write boldly. The authorities, bankrupt and exhausted, invite solidarity to round-table talks. For the first time, the one-party state agrees to semi-free elections. In June 1989, the unimaginable happens. Solidarity wins a sweeping victory. A communist government, undefeated for 40 years, begins to crumble from within, not by invasion or coup, but by ballots and public will. The sight of it electrifies the entire region. Hungary follows quickly. Reformers inside the ruling party push for change, sensing both the weakness of Moscow's grip and their own people's growing impatience. Borders quietly loosen. In May 1989, barbed wire is literally cut along the Austrian frontier. At first a symbolic act, soon a reality. That summer, thousands of East Germans vacationing in Hungary discover they can slip across into Austria and then West Germany. The exodus begins almost by accident, but once it starts, it cannot be contained. The image of families climbing through newly opened border fences spreads across Europe like wildfire. A door in the once sealed curtain has swung open. East Germany, the most tightly controlled of the bloc, reels under the impact. For years, the Berlin Wall has stood as the ultimate symbol of communist power, guarded by soldiers, mines, and orders to shoot. But by 1989, cracks appear even there. Crowds gather in Leipzig for Monday peace prayers, small at first, then swelling into tens of thousands. They march through city streets carrying candles, chanting "Wir sind das Volk," we are the people. Police hesitate, soldiers falter. The regime tries to maintain fear, but finds it harder each week. The sight of unarmed citizens standing firm begins to shake even the most disciplined forces. Czechoslovakia, long subdued after the Prague Springs crushing, awakens again. Students march in November 1989, marking International Students' Day. Police beat them violently, but instead of silencing protest, the violence ignites it. Within days, streets fill with hundreds of thousands ringing keys in the air, a quiet, powerful symbol that it is time to unlock freedom. Intellectuals, artists, workers, and students join hands. The regime, stunned and leaderless, falls without a shot. Václav Havel, once a persecuted playwright, will soon lead the country. In Bulgaria and Romania, change comes differently. Bulgaria's leadership, sensing the shift, quietly removes its longtime dictator Todor Zhivkov in hopes of survival through reform. Romania is harsher. Nicolae Ceausescu clings to absolute power, but by December 1989, protests swell into revolution. Soldiers and civilians clash. The regime tries to crush dissent with bullets, but its brutality backfires. The army turns against Ceausescu. The once untouchable dictator is captured and executed with startling speed. Television broadcasts his fall to a stunned nation that had lived under his severe rule for decades. Each country's story is unique, yet together they create an unstoppable tide. Fear, the foundation on which the Iron Curtain was built, erodes rapidly once people see their neighbors stand without punishment. When solidarity wins elections, when Hungary opens its borders, when East Germans march safely in Leipzig, the myth of invincibility collapses. Whole nations realize the secret they have long carried in private kitchens and whispered prayers. The system survives only because people obey. When enough refuse, it falls. Ordinary life during these months is dizzying. One day you stand in a bread line complaining quietly. The next, you march with thousands through streets once deadly to dissent. A neighbor who always warned caution suddenly joins a protest. Priests speak boldly from pulpits. Friends who feared surveillance pass banned leaflets in broad daylight. Children, long taught to salute the party, watch their parents tear down its posters. Hope moves from whispered ember to roaring flame almost overnight. In East Berlin, the change is breathtaking. 4 weeks in autumn 1989, crowds grow outside the wall, demanding freedom to travel. The regime stumbles, confused and paralyzed. On the night of November 9th, a muddled press conference announces that travel restrictions are lifted, a slip of the tongue, a poorly timed decree. Word spreads like fire. Thousands rush to border crossings. Guards, overwhelmed and without clear orders, open the gates. People stream through, laughing, crying, climbing the hated wall and hammering at its concrete. The world watches as decades of division crumble in a single, astonishing night. Families separated for generations embrace under falling chunks of stone. Strangers dance on the wall's broad top, waving flags and singing through tears. For those who lived under its shadow, the moment feels like waking from a long, gray dream. In Prague, crowds flood Wenceslas Square singing and jingling keys, demanding democracy. In Sofia, statues of old leaders come down quietly as reformists step forward. In Bucharest, fear turns to fury, and a dictator falls. Everywhere, the iron grip proves brittle once broken. The Soviet Union, struggling with its own turmoil, sends no tanks this time. Gorbachev's new doctrine is clear. Each nation will decide its own path. That single absence of force changes history. For families who have spent a lifetime cautious, the speed of change is overwhelming. Parents who whispered at kitchen tables watch their children march in the streets without fear. Grandparents who hid Bibles or forbidden books bring them out openly for the first time in decades. Musicians play songs once banned to cheering crowds. Newspapers print truths long buried. Television, once a voice of propaganda, suddenly shows debates, protests, even criticism of power. The private worlds that sustained people, the warm kitchens, the quiet prayers, the forbidden music, spill into the public square at last. Yet joy is mixed with disbelief and caution. Many have lived through failed uprisings. They half expect tanks to appear. But the tanks do not come. Borders open, governments fall, and the long night begins to lift. For some, the change is almost too much to process. They have built entire lives on quiet endurance. Now they must imagine life in freedom, a task exhilarating and frightening all at once. Even in the final hours, danger lingers. Some regimes fight hard before collapsing, and some protesters pay with their lives. But the momentum is unstoppable. Decades of careful patience, secret networks, and quiet courage suddenly join forces in the open. The wall built of fear, secrecy, and silence proves weaker than anyone dared hope. Walk through these cities in late 1989 and early 1990, and you feel history rushing like spring floodwater breaking an old dam. People tear down barbed wire by hand. Strangers hug in train stations newly connected to the wider world. Shops fill with unfamiliar goods. Radio waves carry uncensored voices. Churches ring bells long muted. Students scrawl graffiti not in secret but proudly. It is not yet clear what the future will bring. Freedom can be chaotic and new hardships wait. But for the first time in decades, the future belongs to those who lived in shadows and refused to let their spirit die. The Iron Curtain does not fall in one single crash. It collapses country by country, night by night, protest by protest. Yet for those who lived behind it, the experience feels like waking to sudden daylight after a lifetime of twilight. Fear does not vanish overnight, but it loses its throne. The long, careful patience of millions proves stronger than the walls built to contain it. Part 14. The Dawn After Darkness. The night the walls opened did not feel like an ending. It felt like breath held too long finally released. Yet in the weeks and months that followed, as people stepped from gray streets into a world of new color, the air filled not only with joy, but with bewilderment. After decades of caution, secrecy, and quiet endurance, freedom arrived suddenly, without a manual. For many, the first taste of open life was sweet. For others, it was dizzying, even frightening. The morning after the fall of the Iron Curtain was radiant but uncertain, a dawn after darkness that revealed both beauty and challenge. The first change was physical. Borders that had once been guarded by guns and dogs became checkpoints with little more than curious soldiers. Trains rolled west without intense searches. Highways once lined with barbed wire opened to traffic. Families long divided drove across to embrace cousins, siblings, parents they had not seen since childhood. Airports filled with first-time travelers clutching passports that no longer locked them inside. For years, they had imagined the West through smuggled magazines and static-filled radio shows. Now they stepped into its streets, blinking at storefronts glowing with abundance. Markets told the story of change faster than speeches could. Where shelves had been empty or sparse, goods appeared overnight. Jeans, coffee, bananas, electronics, glossy books, and music. Shops once run by the state filled with private sellers hungry to trade. The shock was profound. Some stood in Western supermarkets, stunned by rows of fruit and cereal, unable to believe such variety was normal elsewhere. Children ran wide-eyed through toy aisles. Adults who had spent decades rationing sugar or queuing for bread found themselves paralyzed by choice. Joy mingled with unease. Prosperity had been promised but never delivered, and now here it was, yet not everyone could afford it. Economics became the first harsh test of freedom. Planned economies collapsed quickly once controls were lifted. Factories built for an isolated system could not compete on a global market. Many closed, throwing thousands out of work. Inflation surged as new currencies emerged. Old skills lost value while new industries, finance, technology, advertising sprang up overnight, leaving older workers behind. Streets once filled with protests now filled with vendors and entrepreneurs, but also with unemployment lines. Some families thrived, others felt abandoned by the new order. The euphoria of liberation gave way to the complicated work of survival and capitalism. Politics transformed just as rapidly. Parties banned for decades re-emerged. Newspapers that once printed only state propaganda exploded with debate and argument. Parliaments formed, splintered, and reformed. Elections were held, often messy but deeply symbolic. For the first time in living memory, people marked ballots without fear. Former dissidents became presidents and prime ministers. Playwrights, shipyard electricians, and professors found themselves leading nations. For citizens raised on the certainty of one party and one truth, the new noise of democracy was thrilling but confusing. Freedom meant choice, and with choice came disagreement, scandal, and disappointment. The secret police systems, once all-powerful, faced exposure. Archives opened in some countries, revealing decades of spying and betrayal. Ordinary people learned which neighbors or even family members had informed on them. Letters once stolen from mailrooms, recordings from bugged apartments, and detailed files on private lives were suddenly public. For some, this was cathartic. For others, devastating. Communities grappled with forgiveness and anger. The knowledge that fear had turned friends against each other lingered like a wound even in freedom. Culturally, the opening was a flood. Music, art, literature, and film poured in from the West. Rock bands toured cities where their records had once been contraband. Films once copied on fuzzy videotapes played openly in theaters. Artists long censored showed work without fear. Yet along with liberation came a struggle for identity. After years defined by opposition to oppression, what did it mean to create freely? Some mourned the sudden loss of the tight underground communities that had been born in resistance. Others reveled in an explosion of creativity and possibility. Faith stepped back into the light. Churches once watched or emptied filled again, some with believers returning, others simply seeking meaning in a new and uncertain world. Pilgrimages no longer needed to be defiant. They could simply be joyful. Religious leaders, especially in Poland, helped guide moral conversations about the past and the future. Yet, not everyone returned. Decades of control had changed spiritual landscapes forever. Young people adapted fastest. They embraced fashion, technology, and travel with hunger. They studied abroad, launched businesses, and built new cultural scenes. For them, freedom was less about recovering what had been lost and more about building what had never been allowed. Older generations sometimes felt left behind, clinging to familiar habits or struggling with the pace of change. Kitchens that had once been safe, havens of whispered truth, became places where parents and grandparents tried to understand a world their children now navigated with ease. Memory became a new battleground. Some wanted to move on, to forget the gray years and focus only on the future. Others insisted on remembrance, fearing that forgetting might invite new forms of oppression. Museums opened in former prisons and secret police headquarters. Writers chronicled both the suffering and the resilience of life under the curtain. Films and novels wrestled with betrayal, courage, and compromise. Across the region, people struggled to integrate long years of silence into honest history. Even with hardship, the joy of open air remained undeniable. Travel, once a dream, became part of life. New friendships formed across borders. Ideas flowed without censorship. Children grew up without secret oaths to the party or fear of careless words. Public squares that had once hosted parades of obedience now held music festivals, protests, and open markets. The simple ability to speak one's mind in daylight felt miraculous to those who had hidden thoughts for decades. Yet freedom did not heal everything. Some missed the sense of stability, however oppressive, that the old order gave. Poverty and inequality grew as some adapted to capitalism faster than others. Corruption, though different, persisted. The West, once idealized, proved imperfect and sometimes indifferent. Dreams of instant prosperity often met hard reality. But even disappointment did not bring back the old fear. People complained openly now, something impossible before. Governments could be criticized, and if they failed, voters could remove them, an astonishing shift after lifetimes of unchallengeable rule. The psychological change ran deepest. Generations raised in caution had to relearn trust. Parents who had taught their children to keep silent now encouraged them to speak. Individuals long used to double lives tried to merge their public and private selves. Some found this healing, others found it painful, discovering how much of themselves had been hidden or bent to survive. Therapy, memoir, and art became tools for making sense of lives lived under watch. For those who had risked everything, dissidents, underground printers, secret priests, band musicians, the new era was bittersweet. Victory brought recognition, but also the loss of the close-knit, purposeful underground world that had defined them. Fighting oppression had been clear. Building a fair and prosperous society was messier. Some thrived, others felt adrift. Yet most took quiet satisfaction in knowing that their courage helped bring light after such long darkness. The cities themselves changed face. Statues of former leaders were toppled or moved to parks of unwanted monuments. Streets were renamed. Borders that once divided friends became opportunities for travel and trade. Capitalism rushed in, sometimes chaotically, bringing neon signs and advertising to once drab squares. Construction cranes dotted skylines. Old gray apartments remained, but around them new shops and cafes opened. Colors seeped back into everyday life. Still, at night in some homes, candles burn for remembrance. Families tell stories of cues, secret prayers, band songs, and quiet acts of defiance. They want their children to understand what it meant to live in fear and still remain human. They want freedom to feel precious, not taken for granted. And though challenges remain, inequality, corruption, political turmoil, the difference is profound. People can speak of these problems without whispering. They can organize, protest, vote, create. Fear no longer rules. Walk through these cities now, and you hear laughter in public squares where once silence reigned. You hear music that was once forbidden blasting from cafes. You hear debates, messy, loud, imperfect, but free. The air is not without worry, but it is no longer heavy with the dread of watchful eyes. Freedom has brought uncertainty and struggle, but it has also given back dignity. The dawn after darkness is not simple. It is beautiful and complicated, filled with both joy and work. Yet for those who remember the long gray decades, each open border, each uncensored song, each honest conversation is a quiet miracle. The Iron Curtain has fallen, and while new challenges will come, the night that once seemed endless is gone. Part 15. Remembering the Curtain. Morning light spills softly across streets that were once watched and patrolled, falling now on cafes buzzing with talk, on trams filled with students scrolling freely through phones, on markets bursting with color. The old concrete walls remain here and there, fragments of gray painted with murals, but they are no longer barriers. They are memories. The Iron Curtain has been gone for decades, yet its shadow lingers quietly in the lives of those who lived beneath it, and in the stories they tell to those who never knew its weight. For those who grew up behind the curtain, memory lives first in the small details. The scratch of ration cards on a countertop, the metallic taste of fear when a stranger lingered too long near a private conversation, the warm smell of cabbage and bread in kitchens where truth hid safely, the red scarf folded neatly each morning before school, the low hum of radios catching forbidden voices through static. These are not grand political symbols. They are the everyday texture of life in a system built on control. It is also remembered in the strange double life that survival required. People learn to speak two languages, the public one, full of slogans and safety, and the private one, whispered to family and trusted friends. Children grew up skilled in silence, sensing danger before they understood it. Adults measured each word, each glance. Love, faith, art, and music became secret sanctuaries. This careful life kept people safe, but it left deep marks. Habits of caution that linger long after fear is gone. Yet memory is not only fear, it is also quiet resilience. Families who turned gray apartments into warm havens. Teachers who smuggled real learning into censored classrooms. Priests and poets who kept dignity alive when lies filled the air. Musicians who copied songs on worn tapes so young people could dream of wider worlds. Workers who whispered jokes and shared small rebellion. These acts did not topple the curtain on their own, but they kept humanity alive beneath it. The fall of the curtain did not erase these memories, it gave them new meaning. In the first free years, many people felt both joy and disorientation. Freedom was exhilarating but unfamiliar. Trust had to be relearned. People who had hidden their deepest selves stepped into the light slowly, sometimes awkwardly. New systems, markets, parliaments, Open media replaced old certainties with choice and chaos. Some thrived, some struggled, but almost everyone carried the quiet astonishment of no longer being watched. Now, decades later, memory has become story. Grandparents sit at kitchen tables, telling young listeners about cues and informants, about secret prayers and smuggled books, about the night the wall fell and strangers danced atop it. Museums preserve prison cells and listening rooms to show what fear once looked like. Films and novels explore the gray years with honesty and compassion. Historians write, but so do ordinary people. Diaries turn memoirs, blogs filled with recollections, social media posts preserving family tales. The private world once hidden has become public history. There is debate, of course, about how to remember. Some argue that constant looking back traps societies in the past, that new generations should move forward free of old wounds. Others insist on remembrance, warning that forgetting fear makes freedom fragile. The balance is delicate, not to live forever in pain, but not to lose the lessons hard-earned. Most countries have chosen a mix. Commemoration alongside reinvention. Streets once named for party leaders now honor dissidents. Ruins of walls remain, but painted with art and hope. Schools teach the history, but also the courage of those who endured. The personal lessons are profound. People who lived under watch have an instinctive appreciation for small freedoms, the ability to speak without whispering, to travel without permission, to read what they wish. They know the cost of silence and the power of solidarity. Many try to pass this awareness to younger generations who take open borders and honest news for granted. They tell them, freedom is not permanent unless defended. Fear grows slowly but powerfully if unchecked. There are also wounds that still heal. Some families remain divided by old betrayals revealed when secret police files open. Trust broken long ago can be hard to rebuild. Some older citizens struggle with the rapid changes of capitalism and politics, missing the stability, even if oppressive, of the past. Nostalgia sometimes softens harsh memories. Not everyone recalls the fear with equal clarity. But even nostalgia rarely wishes back the cages themselves. It more often mourns the security and shared struggle of survival. For artists, musicians, and writers once silenced, memory fuels creation. Many works today grapple with themes of freedom, secrecy, and truth. Former underground songs play openly. Novels once passed in secret are celebrated. Films once censored win awards. This art keeps alive the reality that even under heavy oppression, creativity and humanity persisted. For young people born after the curtain, the past can feel distant. They live in cities full of color and connection, travel across Europe with ease, and speak openly online. Yet they walk streets lined with old scars, bullet holes patched on buildings, quiet memorials where uprisings fell, museums inside former secret police headquarters. Each mark whispers, this freedom was fought for not with armies but with endurance, imagination, and courage. When the anniversary of the wall's fall comes each year, crowds gather to remember. Candles are lit along former borders. Old protest songs are sung. Veterans of strikes and underground movements stand beside young children who will never know ration cards or hidden radios. The mood is reflective, not triumphant, grateful, cautious, aware that history can change again if vigilance fades. The story of life under the Iron Curtain is therefore more than oppression. It is a story of survival, quiet defiance, and the slow building of hope. It shows how people adapt to fear without losing their inner selves, how secret worlds of love and art can nourish a generation until the chance for change comes. It is a reminder that authoritarian power often looks permanent, but is fragile when people remember their dignity. As night falls in today's free cities, lights glow warmly behind unshuttered windows. Laughter drifts from cafes where ideas are debated aloud. Musicians play without fear. Books banned for decades sit in public libraries. Travelers cross borders without a glance at watchtowers that no longer stand. Freedom here is imperfect, politics still messy, economy still uneven, but it is real and open. For those who remember, every ordinary moment carries quiet wonder. The sound of an uncensored radio, the ease of telling a joke without risk, the ability to vote, to travel, to speak truth in daylight. For those who never lived it, these freedoms seem normal, and that, too, is part of the victory. The Iron Curtain fell not because it was suddenly weak, but because millions of ordinary people held on to hope, to culture, to one another long enough for the chance to push. They endured decades of control without letting it crush their humanity. When the moment came, they were ready. Their story is not just history, it is a living warning and a quiet triumph. It reminds the world that even in long darkness, light can be kept alive, waiting for dawn. Thank you for traveling through this long and quiet journey with me. From gray city streets where fear once lingered, to kitchens where hope was carefully kept alive, and finally into the light of freedom. History is more than dates and names. It is the sound of cautious whispers, the warmth of hidden songs, the quiet courage of ordinary people who endured until change became possible. Their story reminds us that even when walls seem unbreakable, dignity and imagination can survive, and one day they can help bring those walls down. If you found comfort in this journey and would like to join me for more nights of history told slowly and gently, I invite you to subscribe to History to Relax. Here, we explore the human side of the past, not with loud battles or rushing headlines, but with patience and reflection. Your support helps keep these stories alive. You can like this video to help it reach others, leave a thought or memory in the comments, and subscribe to follow future journeys into hidden corners of history. For now, let the weight of these memories settle softly. The night is quiet, the walls have fallen, and the world beyond them waits in the open. Breathe deeply, rest well, and remember, freedom, once won, is precious. Sleep peacefully, and until next time, good night.